It's 6:01. I will call the Business and Finance Committee meeting to order. And we have a full house. We're all here today. So on that note, I will ask Director Emmanuelson to please provide the financial report of the second quarter.
Thank you. In your packet, you'll find the second quarter financial report. It's a budget report for 2022. Cover memo indicates that by and large things are going within anticipated parameters, with the exception that the court fines for police citations are still continuing to decline due to fewer citations being issued than in previous years. We'll continue to monitor that, perhaps have a discussion about that when we look at the 2023 budget and revising those estimates for those revenues in 2023. There is a number of variability within the budget. We do know what our overall costs are likely to be for the big items, staff and benefits, contractual, but providing service delivery is a variable endeavor. So some of those costs will shift back and forth between different service areas, particularly within the Department of Public Works. But I'm satisfied that the budget is performing overall in accordance with expectations. That being said, if there's any particular questions, I'd be happy to address those now.
I guess I'm just going to start not there, but I just was on the page with the 4480 North Lake Drive project summary. And maybe perhaps it's more of a Leanne question, Director Buchlick, but do you happen to know where we are on this? Be close to 1144 looks a little lower than I was expecting. We know.
Well, that's what we've spent. We have ongoing studies with, I believe, actions yet to become for the board for additional work at that site. So that's a life-to-date expenditure on that particular project. You see, I have the years noted in the left side there, just to kind of give you a little perspective on.
Okay, thank you. And then I just noticed some of the bond numbers were highlighted in color. Was there any particular reason? All right.
Bond numbers? What do you? It could be. I highlight stuff in my worksheets all over the place.
Well, if you're highlighting it, I want to know why.
Okay.
I guess just in general, then you see more fluidity and from the expected expenses in DPW going forward. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, we look at the overall staff costs, and we try to make our best estimate of how those will be spread out in the various service delivery areas. But that's a very dynamic environment down there. They have to respond to whatever's in front of them. So overall, those costs are good, but you'll see when you look at the budget to actual in different areas, you may see a larger variety of, what's your year to date compared to the budget. And benefit costs are dragged in the payroll system with the wages. So they all tend to go somewhat in unison within each division. Again, we haven't hired any new staff positions other than those that were in the budget or they've been approved by the board. So in aggregate, we're in good shape on the salary and benefit costs.
And if I was going to look for I guess fuel was the one place I thought we would have been impacted. I know the current economic situation. Obviously, that's a DPW cost. You're not seeing anything to be worried about there.
Well, I mean, we're seeing increased costs. It's a known variable, right? So We all expect that to happen. We're going to have
Probably not quite to this level.
right. We're going to have another talk on what we think 2023 will bring. And, but again, we can only estimate and then see what the market comes to bear next year. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that.
I just, for instance, I saw miscellaneous fuel is
Mhm. Probably not very surprising, right? Yeah,
mission.
yeah.
Okay. And then I had asked for information about the, I'll call it the COVID money, ARPA. And there was a report on that.
Right, we included a reference to it in the second quarter financial report in a table format, and then also later this evening, there is a agenda item on that topic as well.
And so these, it's all in hand, the 1.3 million,
Correct.
and there's no more coming unless the new legislation passes.
Correct.
And the sound and video, that's paid out today. Do we think that that's?
That's still an estimate. There's a few things with our sound, video, and meeting room improvements that are still trying to get ironed out. We won't have a final cost on that probably till, quite honestly, very near to the end of the year. But we'll just have to see how that works out. This was quite a leap in technology for the village. So we'd like to try to make it work as fabulous as we can, and it's just going to take a little more time to iron out some of the details.
And just for anyone who's interested, the leaf vacs, that's two of those under that 439,000. Got two for that cost, right?
That's correct.
And the document digitalization, I believe, Assistant Manager Anderson, that is not, we have not gone out for a bid on that yet.
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
Those are $250,000.
Can I ask where we are? I mean,
Page 2.
no. I know where we are in the agenda.
Okay.
Can I ask where we are in the document digitalization? I mean, why has it not gone?
The
forward?
delay has been in deciding what platform we were going to utilize and what version of the platform we're going to utilize to support the record keeping of those documents. When former clerk Ruckman left and we had to transition in that department, that is the department that is in charge of that activity. And with 4 elections this year, Clerk Harrell is just not prepared to engage in that until after the elections, probably very early next year. So again, later tonight, you'll see that there's still going to be a range of costs for that, because that was like a real general placeholder cost back when we were awarded the funds. Hope to know a lot more information, and that'll be brought before the board, again, depending on the final scope of services for that and what the new platform supports.
It's my understanding that this includes the village board minutes and property documents. Is that, and by that, my understanding is, I guess I could use some clarity on that. If I wanted to go online and look up my property where I live or where I rent, I could go and look and see what the assessments have been and the permits. Is that?
That's one of the biggest drivers. And again, you know, when we get to the point of putting on an RFP for this effort, I'm sure there'll be scope decisions for the board to have at that point in time, which will again determine, you know, what we think would be the final price range, depending on what kind of responses we get to that request for proposal. That's not something we can do in-house.
This is just going to be one of those things where I think I'll probably keep asking about, because we have another election in a large in spring. So hoping to get this started for that, certainly before 3rd or 4th 2020. No, I mean, there's going to be a lot on for election. Taking this,
Right. My understanding was originally this was supposed to be done in July of 2022. So I'm disappointed.
Well, we'll continue to look at that and see how we can keep that project moving forward to the best of our ability.
Do we want a motion of any kind or?
It's an informational report, so I don't ask for a motion.
I mean, I'd like to wait only because I want to see where we end up the 300K that hasn't been allocated. And again, like some of these sound and video, some targets.
It's just, from my perspective, it's a high priority item in terms of transparency. And my understanding is it would save staff time. Certainly, if you can go look at your property documents online instead of, I've never done this, you go to Historical Society, or do you go to the customer service if you say, I'd like to see documents on my
You go to
property?
the planning department and they try to
Planning.
find them.
And
Yeah,
I
there-
don't know how much time the director there spends on this, or his
I
assistant.
don't think there's a huge time commitment on that, but the long-term strategy is that these are permanent records of the village. Having them in electronic format is probably the best practice. It improves access to those records for, again, the inception of that is both for not having to come to Village Hall as far as also social distancing thoughts at the time. So I think for all those reasons, the building files will be digitalized. And then again, from there, I'm sure there'll be multiple scope decisions for the board to consider depending on, ultimately what we feel we can support cost-wise.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Don't have any.
No.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn,
Second.
moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Manuelson.
All right, it's 6:14. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee. All members are present. There are 3 items on the agenda: the update on the police chief transition, discuss and consider prioritization of remaining organizational study recommendations, consider recommendations for items 2, 4, and 5. And third, consider reclassification of police officer position to police sergeant. We have all of these will be presented by Chief Worth. We have 45 minutes budgeted. So if folks could keep questions till the end of each segment, and then we'll see if there's any questions from the public as well. But the floor is yours, Chief.
Thank you, Trustee Yardendorfer. And I also brought with me Captain Fernando Santiago to aid in some of the questions that may be asked. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the update of the police chief transition unless there's some questions regarding it. But as you remember from the last presentation, I set forth 30, 60, and 90 to 120-day goals, several of which have been completed, including all of the check-ins with the officers. And that was a formal check-in with every single one of them in my office. I continue to meet with the officers on a regular basis, informally, through conversations in the squad room, out on assignments, and during roll calls. In the 60-day review, the policies and procedures, which is still in progress. There's quite a number of them, so I'm still working through all of them. But then review the WISE study, the WISE organizational study, which is completed, and we'll get into that in one of the next items on the agenda. 90 to 120 days, determine the organizational operational direction of the department, which is still in progress. The WISE study, again, we'll be discussing shortly, and the prioritization of remaining recommendations. Leadership plan, as I mentioned, is an ongoing communication with the officers. I've also had a meeting with all of the supervisory staff to outline my expectations for their engagement, the performance measures for the officers, which includes also implementing a yearly performance review and quarterly check-ins with them, which had not taken place prior to my appointment. And then building our interaction strategies and implementing bicycle and foot patrols as applicable with staffing. Clear communication and engagement with the community. I hope several of you have been present at some of the community events where we've been present. And I'd like to give a shameless plug for tomorrow's National Night Out event at Atwater School. Captain Santiago has done a fantastic job putting together a great event and really an opportunity for us to showcase not only ourselves, but all of the North Shore Fire Department. We've also participated in Sunday. We were at the farmers market. Last week, we were at the summer event for the library. So lots of community opportunities, engagement there. We're working on improving our messaging with Facebook, Twitter, and some other platforms. I mentioned training for crisis intervention training, fair and impartial policing, and de-escalation training. All of our officers are CIT trained, crisis intervention trained. We're also hosting a crisis intervention training in September. And Milwaukee Police Department is putting on an advanced CIT training, which I've shared with all of our officers for attendance, which also will also include some training in the homeless outreach program. And then we also have a member of our department attending a Train the Trainer event for fair and impartial policing in October. And then another member attending a training in ICAT, which is integrating communications, assessments, and tactics, which is a national standard established by the Police Executive Research Forum. And then ongoing mental health, wellness services, contracting with first responders, psychological services. That's my update for the police chief transition. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Did you say you're doing annual job evaluation for the first time or an annual meeting with each officer?
It's an annual evaluation, which will also outline their performance, expectations, goal setting, training opportunities, those types of things.
And that hadn't been done prior?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Trustee Kudo, any questions?
I have no question.
All right. Any questions from members of the public? If you do so, please raise your hand. Not seeing any, I think we can proceed to the next item.
Thank you. The next item is the consideration, review, and discuss the prioritization and recommendations of the Weiss organizational study. The two that I've outlined for today's discussion are items 2, 4, and 5, and I'll take them one at a time, although there are some overlapping recommendations in this study. The history has been provided, as well as links to a document that I prepared a summary and then a list of recommendations found in an Excel format, which is updated with our status. I've also linked the union agreement here. Weiss recommendation number 2 is that the Shorewood Police Department should examine alternative methods for handling calls for service and patrol staffing. One of the recommendations is examining if the detective bureau should be reduced to one officer. I'm sorry, one detective. I referenced the police union agreement in this, in that it is my recommendation in agreement with the police union to keep 2 detectives and promote into a future detective vacancy through a promotion process. One of the things that I'd like to note from the Weiss organizational study is the lack of information that was provided. And I know that there were some questions as to what the detectives were doing. The way that I view the lack of information about what the detectives were doing is an opportunity for us to prove what we can do with the detectives and to use them in a greater sense and also hold them accountable for their performance and assigning them tasks specifically. So the way that we're going to do this is, as I indicated, put accountability measures in place for them. Part of those accountability measures take place through the records management system, ProPhoenix, that we're currently using, and building in platforms within that system for the detectives to document all of their time and to account for the time that they're spending on cases. Being a fresh set of eyes here to the department, I know what the detectives are capable of, especially having the experience coming from a much larger agency. My intent for the detectives, if this is approved, is ultimately to have one detective on the day shift and the early shift and have them much more responsive to all felony assignments, implementing case management and case follow-up systems for them, and to be much more engaged with conducting any necessary investigation, especially for felonies, but in certain misdemeanors as well. As I mentioned, this is going to be a part of the performance measures that are in place yearly, and then quarterly check-ins informally with every single one of the officers. Captain Santiago is here to discuss just a little bit of the ProPhoenix system and some of the platforms that can be implemented within our records management system to ensure that the detectives are held accountable for activity and time. If you please, I'll turn it over to Captain Santiago to explain that just a little bit.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So the way the chief mentioned accountability and the way that detectives worked prior to us arriving is the system for them selecting cases and being assigned cases was pretty cumbersome, to say the least. There was no real process or outline that they could follow us to know which cases they're going to get involved in and which ones they're going to work and how long they're going to work them. ProPhoenix, and I've used it in the past, has a case management module attached to it, which means when a when a crime happens, an investigation, it's open. There's a central spot where all the information that's taking place within that for that investigation takes place. The supervisor can assign the case to a detective. The detective then all the reports are in the same place. The detective can add efforts, meaning if they wrote a search warrant or in the process of waiting for results or reviewing results of a subpoena, you know that that's what they're working on, even though you might not be seeing the actual records in that section of the case management system. You can assign tasks if you find that there's something that they should be working on or a step that needs to be followed up on. Then you also get messages and let me see. So the supervisor will get an actual message to let them, hey, it's time to review whatever task was assigned. It's time to review the case to see where they're at. It's time to meet with the officer and find out what the next steps are going to be for that investigation. So it gives us a sense of all the things they're actually doing, and it gives you one spot where we can actually make sure that the investigation is being completed on time, all the steps are being followed, and hopefully taken to a successful prosecution by the DS office.
One of the things that I'd like to note in the comment section from the Weiss organizational study is Dr. Weiss indicates that 14% of the cases in Shorewood are assigned for follow-up, and he noted that that seems remarkably low, and then assumed that nothing happens with the remaining 86% of the cases. That's not accurate. All of the cases are followed up until there's nothing further for them to do in each case. But this is where the detectives are going to take a much more hearty role in that, reviewing cases by the officers and assuring that everything is done and then following up as necessary. Are there any questions about that specifically, or I'll move on?
So it sounds like you're going to shift a little bit of the responsibility for follow-up from the officers to the detectives as a case is wound up. That,
Yes, that's accurate. I mean, there are certain cases that the officers will be able to follow up and do their own investigation, start to finish. But every felony case or every time-intensive case, the detectives will at least have review or some part of that. Ideally, what we'd like to do is keep the officers out on the street, keep them visible, and keep them engaged in keeping Shorewood a safe community.
okay.
All right.
Any other
Anything?
questions?
Okay.
Was there some questions though about, I'm trying to remember from the study, cases that were resolved by a detective? Did the study address how many cases they were able to resolve?
I believe
the
that's,
effectiveness, you know what I'm saying?
well, he mentions that only 79 reported crimes are 14% of the total. And I don't know if this is specific to detectives, were assigned for follow-up with 39 crimes cleared by arrest. So there is some numbers in here. Again, I don't know if it's specific to the detectives. But we believe that that number can be significantly higher
In
And-
terms of solving.
in solving and involvement for follow-up.
Okay. Chief, in your view, what is the public benefit of maintaining the two detective positions? Just put simply, I mean, what should people expect, and how would you measure success if keeping two in that role?
Sure. I think what the public should expect is our officers to be more visible out on the street. Some of the cases, take fraud, for example. Fraud cases are very labor intensive with the amount of financial records that need to be obtained, video surveillance, follow-up, and those types of things. And aside from
What's an example of like a fraud case?
so a fraud case could be a misusing somebody's identity to apply for a credit card or a loan, or writing a bad check could be an example of a fraud case. Any type of scam that occurs through phishing emails or text messages where somebody is asked to give money for something, and they're essentially scammed out of that money with very little recourse. Those are all very labor-intensive investigations. So the benefit of having the two detectives, again, is it provides an opportunity for the officers to remain on the street, to remain available for calls for service, to engage in some of the activities that we'd like to see them, the community engagement piece, some of the proactive policing, business checks, and just ensuring the overall safety of the village of Shorewood. Having the two detectives in place will take some of that workload off of the officers, which can sometimes take hours. In fact, 2 weeks ago, and I think I mentioned this to you, Trustee Arndorfer, we had an officer involved in a fraud case that took at least 2 shifts. And then he was ultimately took somebody into custody for that, which includes the arrest, upwards of 2 hours, conveyance, an interview, depending on whether or not they talk. So that's more and more hours that they spend that could be handled and probably should be handled by a detective.
Thank you. Trustee Kudo, any questions?
Just, can you give us an idea, and this sort of goes off of Trustee Arndorf's question, about accountability to command staff, just when should we expect to see more officers in this? And should we expect, I mean, obviously, they've been at some of these events and it's been wonderful, and you're an excellent custard scooper. But what's the timetable? Like, what's expect to pay out community-wise?
I would just say I have seen more squads in my neighborhood in the last few months than I've seen in 25 years in Shorewood.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sure that the officers will appreciate that as well. As far as the payout and the timetable, as trustee Stokerbrand mentioned, we are reinforcing our expectations that they're out on the street much more frequently or with much more regularity, conducting their patrols and then obviously responding to calls for service. We do have a detective that is eligible for retirement in the next year. So we'll hopefully, with the board's permission, fill that position. I mean, it could take up to a year, but once we get a new captain in place as well, that will be one of their primary functions, is to ensure the accountability measures are in place with the detectives. So we should see almost an immediate turnaround with case assignment, management, and follow-up.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion? Or would anyone like to make a motion? Me.
Sure, I'll make a motion. Move to approve the reclassification of a police officer to police sergeant and approve the organizational chart change to reflect 6 sergeants and 14 police.
Well, that was easy. I don't even have to go through that
Well,
one
that's,
then. Thank you.
I just skipped one, didn't I?
You did skip one.
I read it all and I still like that one. That's how you know I read it. Where is the other? It's up here. There we go. Oh, they're separate like that. Okay. I move to recommend maintaining 2 detectives positions. I move to recommend filling the future detective vacancy through a promotional process. I move to recommend maintaining the current records manager.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to clarify then. The detectives report to 5 sergeants. That sounds a little, I'm just looking at this flow chart. Who do the detectives report to? They report directly to you or to captain? Who, like you mentioned, you can look at the data. Who's going to be checking Pro Phoenix data and say Detective A is not living up to expectations?
Sure. The detectives are ultimately going to be reporting to the new captain once appointed. And the captain will then direct the sergeants to make assignments, but ultimately the detectives will report to the captain.
Okay.
Would any members of the public like to speak at this time? If so, please raise your hand. All right, not seeing any, I think we can go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want me to continue going through the recommendations, or are you all satisfied with what's documented here?
Satisfied. I think we can move on to the reclassification,
Okay, thank you.
despite Eric's best intentions, I think.
So the reclassification of the police officer position to the police sergeant position. Right now, as trustee Stokerbrand mentioned, there are only 5 sergeants, 2 on the day shift, 2 on the overnight shift, the late shift, and 1 promoted on the early shift and 1 as an acting sergeant. The acting sergeant has been in that position for just under a year. And I would like to reclassify a police officer position to a police sergeant to formally promote him to a sergeant's position. The impact that it has on staffing is very little. And although I would like to maintain a police officer position and add a police sergeant position, I understand it's not fiscally possible to do so. So the next best alternative is to reclassify that police officer position. Captain Santiago did an analysis of the amount of overtime that would have been expended if we were to cover a police sergeant position. And it's approximately $60,000, just shy of $60,000. What's important to note in the reclassification is that police sergeants have the ability and do often act as police officers, responding to calls for service and performing all of the duties that are expected of our police officers when they're not otherwise engaged in their supervisory activities. I'd like to note the union contract as well, that it states specifically, it shall remain the unchallenged power of the village board to create additional supervisory personnel as they deem necessary. And such powers and authority in general include, but are not limited to, the right to determine the services and level of services to be offered by the village, to establish, continue, abolish, or alter policies, practices, and procedures for the operation of the village, to determine the number and types of employees required, and to increase or decrease the number of employees accordingly. As I mentioned, we have had the acting sergeant in that position for just under a year, and he has done an exemplary job as a sergeant. With the staffing levels as they currently are, and I expect them to remain as such, we have the largest number of newer officers on the early shift, which is the 2:45 PM to 11 PM shift, and the greatest level of staffing, minimum staffing, with 3 officers and 1 sergeant. 1 sergeant is required to work every single shift. So the recommendation ultimately is to, for the organizational chart, to have 2 captains once the second captain is appointed, 6 sergeants, 14 full-time police officers, and 2 detectives.
All right, trustees, any questions?
No questions. I'm happy to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Move to approve, unless there's a question from trustee Stockbrand. Move to approve the reclassification of a police officer to police sergeant and approve the organizational chart change to reflect 6 sergeants and 14 police officers.
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
I just want to clarify then, so monetarily, budget-wise, this is nothing significant going forward for the rest of the year. Obviously, we're halfway through the budget.
Yeah, nothing significant. In fact, there's been overtime savings, as I indicated, about $60,000. But in the acting position, the officer has been at sergeant's pay. So there's no significant change in that.
And so this only leaves you down 1 captain. So you're in a hiring position for 1. Is that correct?
Correct. We did just hire to fill a vacant police officer position, and that officer starts on August 8th.
Okay. And where are you then with the captain, seeking the captain?
We will start 2nd round interviews next week.
Okay, great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
My only one quick thing would be, when you do get the second captain, you might just want to change flow chart the way that you just described it. So that right now, as trustee Stokebrand said, police sergeants our detectives are reporting to sergeants as opposed to captain. It can be a house.
Thank you.
So you could be fully staffed by Labor Day.
Ideally,
Optimistically.
ideally.
Great.
All right. Would any members of the public like to speak? All right. Seeing none, can move forward with a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Carries 3-0.
Trustee Andorfer, as a matter of business, does the reclassification then have to be voted to move to the board, or?
Yes, that's on the board agenda.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay,
Yes, it needs to be voted by the full board.
okay. Thank you.
All right. With that, can I get a,
Before we adjourn quickly, I just want to say I did a ride along last week with 2 officers for 8 hours. And it was fantastic. Just the level of professionalism, I won't call it, but the level of professionalism, I was able to do, 4 hours with 1 officer and 4 hours with another officer. Saw Shorewood from an officer's perspective, at least for 8 hours. Fantastic. Oh, incredibly highly. you and, you know, else. What our officers. Okay, and. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
All right, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you very much, Chief Worth and Captain Santiago. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So 7 PM, so we'll call to order the Community and Business Relations Committee. Having all members present, we will start with presentation.
Sure. First on the agenda is a review of the policy for special events. This is still at staff level, looking to draft an ordinance. It's been a while, so staff is looking to reaffirm that the previous guidance given to staff to prepare that ordinance is still consistent with the current board's expectations and desires. Manager Ewald highlighted in blue the points that guidance was provided to have staff start drafting the ordinance requirements. And then a secondary or an additional discussion near the end of the memo in yellow relates to the fees and fee practices associated with all the costs the village incurs to facilitate these events. So I think if we would go through the items in order and just see if there's any new direction. We'll make note of new direction. Otherwise, if you can affirm the previous guidance, and then staff will continue working on drafting an ordinance for these activities.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
I have none.
So I guess one of the questions is, do we want to continue having people sign a waiver to have a block party? Is this where we're working? Or do you want to, I saw the questions here, should block parties be allowed if the village does not have barricades? Are we just working through these items, or?
I think the block party is probably the next agenda item.
I'm sorry.
So, I mean, the highlights of this is that the board does not desire to limit the number of events to be held per year for special events. And not to limit events being village sponsored. Every applicant should be charged the fee. The fee should be uniformly charged. No one should be exempt from the fee for a special event. Applications go to JP&L for recommendations. No prioritization of events based on who it is.
Block party, a special event. And every block party would go to JP&L. That's what happens now.
My understanding.
But at this point, we're focused, I mean, my understanding is we're focusing
Nope.
on special events, right? Art?
Just a larger events we were discussing.
But I guess I'm confused by, I'm on page 79, and the final bullet point there is just reviewing the timeline, and it says special event ordinance 3004, including street festivals, parades, and block party policy information. So just because it's in that policy doesn't mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right, that's not a, that your perception of that's understood. That's not the, that's something we'll clear up. For sure. So do we believe that we're generally on track with the items previously identified by prior boards?
Right, I guess my, the $100 staff thinks that that's adequate to cover costs.
No,
Does it go up then?
Well, that's part of the conversation. So looking at these event costs and some of the, they're historical, but Criterium, 4th of July, Camp Bar, Riders. What do other communities do? Do they attempt to recoup some costs? Do they have a uniform dollar amount for a fee like we currently have? What's sort of the process? Does anyone know?
Art, do you have that background at this off the top of your head? I know at a staff level, we talk, I mean, we'll spend half hour to 45 minutes with all department heads reviewing an application at staff level to make sure it's complete and that any needs are addressed. I know a significant effort goes into barricade set up by Public Works, both in acquiring the barricades and moving them in and out after the events. We talk about garbage collection. We talk about the need for police to be on site or additional staff being on site. What are the other? Usually the portable restrooms are the responsibility of the event organizer. Recently, I recall that they're doing additional trash containers for events that generate their own, like a vendor would have their own containers. Now, they wouldn't use the street containers, but obviously our street containers fill up as well. So those are a variety of things that come up at a staff level. The question is, what's the guidance to try to either recover those costs or to just make it a token fee to apply for, or maybe make it a higher base fee. Those are the types of discussion, or charge for services, right, per hour for police officers, or per street barricade or intersection closure. Pretty broad range.
I guess and I may be alone in this, so we could talk about it. I guess I would be interested to see, one, what do other communities around here do for these types of events? And two, whether or not these police and public works costs are already budgeted for and included, or are these overtime costs? So if these are overtime costs, I think that's important that we know that as well. Because, I mean, we do have, we have small department, a lot of responsibility. If we have overtime costs. I'd like to.
We can bring you that information back.
It seems reasonable to bill back for those, to me.
I mean, these are not insignificant.
Right. I mean, the 4th of July, for example, is that then the foundation steps in for those?
Well, it's a joint effort between the village. It's a village event. As far as I can recall, it's the only one the village formally sponsors. The Shorewood Foundation is a very large sponsor of the event for the village. I think in most cases you wouldn't charge yourself for putting on your own event, but the bigger weekend events, again, draw overtime wages from DPW, from police. A weekday event may not be overtime. It would just divert staff from other tasks. So
When was the $100 fee established, do you know?
I would guess it's some time ago,
Okay.
decades.
Okay.
And I know this has come up in the past, the tree lighting in the park. One, I think if we're going to keep it, we're going to change the name spreadsheet. And two, I mean, there are, there's a $200 cost W I don't know how comfortable I am lighting a holiday tree over time for our staff.
Meaning the other thing is, you know, there's electricity. I mean, I'm sure it's small, but I think that was one of the questions that was brought up at the time. Maybe not with the Human Relations Commission, but somewhere in that discussion was, when you allow the menorah, they're plugging into the same, you know, village power.
I mean, I think, oh, go ahead, Art.
I just want to clarify, this is not a tree lighting and water.
Oh.
At electricity.
Thank you.
This one is. Holiday, whatever.
Okay.
Even here is not it.
Okay, good to know. Then we should clarify that and possibly add the other one.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, are there any other questions, comments about this portion? Go ahead.
I'm not sure how time sensitive it is. I would be interested in making a deferral until we found out what other communities do for like the Shorewood Criterion, different bars. I mean, you know, there are bars on Brady Street that sponsor Packer or soccer. You know, if we wanted to see what other communities are doing, are you interested in a deferral, or is this, how time sensitive is this? If we want to
Depends on
compare
when
with
you
other
want an
communities.
ordinance.
I mean, a deferral just keeps current practice in place until we come up with a decision. That'd be correct.
I guess how the question then becomes, how important is information about other local communities?
Well, I think if you don't, I apologize for interrupting, but you know, they've got the two components. We've got the fees and then we've got the general policy direction. I think the policy direction is going to be the most significant part of the ordinance. So if we can affirm that the policy direction previously given is consistent with the general sentiment of the current board or the current committee, and we can certainly begin drafting that language for you to review under ordinance approval processes. And we can certainly bring back additional information about fees as a supplemental item to today's discussion to also be incorporated in the ordinance language when that's ready to come forward. That ordinance is going to take a little time to draft, but I wouldn't expect that to be coming in September. Probably, I think the goal is to have that in place perhaps by the end of the year so that we can start looking towards 2023 events and rules and regulations and requirements.
Trustee
Could
Orndorfer?
try a motion. I affirm the direction provided by prior community and business relations committees and recommend further exploration of appropriate levels for a special event permit.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We have any conversation, any questions from the community? Not seeing any final questions or conversation from the committee?
And so then just to clarify, this does not apply to the block parties,
That's correct.
and that we would look at billing back for DPW and police costs to events that are not sponsored by the.
Correct.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next, item, please.
Chris, are you familiar with block parties at all, or no? Bart, are you more familiar with block parties other than what's in the memo? So really the agenda items for discussions on the block party, again, is it's certainly a wonderful community of activity to have residents come in and request that we close off their streets for them to have a party. But there is quite a few permits coming through a year. It's quite a process downstairs to get all the information together, to manage the number of events that can be held per weekend. So policy 4 is that attached? There's a link to it. Had governed our practices on that. So the agenda items is, should block parties be allowed if we don't have sufficient barricades for roadway closure? I think that's our primary concern, is if we don't start restricting the number of block parties to be held on any given time frame, that we don't have sufficient barricades to safely barricade the streets. The other thing is, do we want to have additional resources committed to purchase barricades for the village to provide for block parties? And these barricades are also damaged and wear out. Should we allow applicants to provide their own barricades? There's some concerns at staff level that they would not properly barricade streets for safety. Number 4, should we have a waiver if your board feels that it's appropriate for applicants to provide their own barricades? Should we have a waiver? Should we require the type 3 barricade or lesser version? Type 3 is photo is attached in the waiver agreement. And then block parties are currently free. If the committee would like to require a fee, please give staff direction on that. So again, quite a bit to come in off the fly with.
Yep.
But we'd like to, again, continue to have this discussion because we want to be prepared for 2023 and make sure that if we continue to do block parties, are done in a safe manner. But there seems to be a need for either additional resources or constraints on the process that they can be done in that manner.
So why don't we take 1 through 6 between the 3 of us? We can just run through them. Any discussions or questions? Does that work? Okay, so number 1, should block parties be allowed if the village does not have sufficient barricades to provide roadway closure?
It seems to me we should be able to have enough barricades if someone wants to have a block party in Shorewood. We should be able to come up with the money for, the type 3 or whatever. I'm not sure we know the exact number right now. It looks to me like I don't see how many we need. I just see the 2,500. I'm not sure how many new barricades that will buy us. 10. It's for 10 plus shipping. We don't have a place to store them though. We do. I'm sure that.
I'm saying, when you say 10, is that single barricade or?
I think it's, yeah, so it says $2,500.
Okay. Yeah. Individual. Okay, got
And
it.
you need 4 per
4 per event, right?
Right.
So that would only give you 2 extra.
2 extra events.
Well, that's to
Closings.
replace 10 a year. That doesn't really, I don't believe that expands our inventory. I think that's,
But
I didn't write it, but
okay,
my understanding.
thanks. Thank you.
I mean, my thought is, I don't ever want to say no to a block party. I don't want to be in a position as a village to deny residents' ability to get together safely on their streets.
In the 3 weeks of summer that we have.
Right. I mean, it just, we can figure out a way to do this. And if that means that, we need to provide more resources, or we need to put together a higher fee structure for those larger events to help compensate for these block parties, that's something I would be interested in looking at.
Yeah, there should be no barricades. Sorry, had to. I think we just previously said, though, we were in support of keeping, staff wanted 1 flat fee. So I understand your point about making some revenue on the big ones to pay for the extra barricades. But if we just approve, a consistent fee, that would kind of go against that. I just think we should be able to find enough money in the budget for additional barricades. The question is coming up with the number. And I guess I would just defer to staff to use your best guess, and we're putting the budget together this fall. Obviously, that just provides barricades. I mean, if we order them now, they should be around. Shorewood Feast is still obviously going to be a problem, right? Otherwise, everything is pretty much done.
I think those events are covered. It's when you have that event with
Oh.
multiple block parties that
And the
we
4th
start
of July.
running-
And
Right,
the-
we
so
start
the-
running
so it's just-
short.
It's really the 3 trick weekends, 4th of July, Criterion, and the Shorewood Feast.
Yeah, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where you're going with this is if DPW has a budget request for additional barricades, they should present that at budget
Right.
and we can
Be ready for
take it up.
2023.
Yeah, take it up there and have, have reasoning behind the additional budget request.
And if you say it's to allow more block parties during these 3 critical events that take all of our barricades, that will explain it, and I'll vote in favor.
As what
Well, if I might add, though, again, the issue is at some point you'll still run into a threshold that we don't have unlimited barricades and somebody's going to request an 8th block party for the week and we don't have sufficient barricades. So should we impose limits that says no matter what level of barricades we have, we're at our limit. I'm sorry, we can't approve a block party for this date.
I guess I can't imagine us not having enough barricades if we're opening it up in the budget process. We've certainly got data for the
Like,
last 10
I
years.
remember correspondence a while back, I think it was on, maybe it was somewhere on Shorewood where that was, Shorewood Boulevard where that was an issue. Where some neighbors were trying to come up with a solution like you described.
I mean, that goes to the point number 5, which is, do you require those larger flashing barricades? Or do we allow for something lesser? And if we allow for something lesser than a category type or a type 3 barricade, then I cannot fathom us not having enough barricades in this village to cover everything that we, whether it's a barrel or a barricade or, something. Yeah, a vehicle, a dump truck, whatever it happens to be, there shouldn't be a situation where we can't say yes. We just have to, and I would leave it up to DPW to get to yes. I just don't think we should say that.
I agree. I would always hope that we would be able to have enough barricades to meet the safety standard. But to your point, if you've got orange barrels,
I mean, staff's strongest recommendation is to keep it type 3 safety.
yeah.
So, and then it would be implicit then that number 2 would be, yes, you want us to pursue funding so we can maintain our stock of barricades,
I would support that.
annual
Yes.
funding for that. How about item 3 then?
I'm not in favor of that because I don't think it's their responsibility.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And I also don't want something that's inadequate to be there and then have someone drive through and
Yeah.
the worst case scenario happens.
Agree.
Okay.
Number 4 then is not applicable.
Yep.
Number 5, you concur that type 3 barricades are the safest, is the manner we should proceed for block party and street closure?
That'd be my feeling.
I think it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's preferred. But if we get into a situation where we are out and there are other things we can use, other types of barricades, but I think type 3 would be
Standard practice.
Right.
Yeah, I'd want a point of view from staff, or there might be some solution there, but yeah, I generally agree.
And then number 6,
I completely, it should be, as far as
Yeah,
I
I think
can.
Agree.
Okay,
thank you very much.
you're welcome. We need a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Nope, we need a motion
Oh,
to
I'm
direct
sorry.
staff.
Um,
Yes, ma'am.
I move to direct staff to prepare an ordinance for block parties reflective of the responses to the questions above for review at a future meeting.
Do I have a
Second.
Motion with the second. Any final discussion from the community or the committee? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 3-0. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned at 7:24.
Good evening. It's 7:30 and I'd like to call to order regular meeting of the village board. President McCaig is with us today from a remote location. She asked me to chair the meeting in her stead. Very privileged to have this position, so thank you. All members of the board are present. Has the meeting been publicly noticed according to law?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
All right, the first item, we have two special orders of business on this very robust agenda for the evening. First item is the North Shore Fire Department update on the Glendale Fire Station design and possibility of North Shore Health Department single office location in the Glendale Station. With us tonight are, I believe, Chief Whitaker and Becky Rowland.
Yes, we are here together through the magic of Zoom. She and I just finished the same presentation at a Brown Deer meeting and now are into Shorewood without having to get in our car.
All
So,
right. Here. Okay, thank you.
yeah, good evening, everyone. The reason we're here tonight is to talk about what may be coming up in the future and sort of give the board a heads up on some decisions that may come to the board in fall, and to get you some information ahead of time so you're aware of what may be asked in the fall. But a little background is in 2016, the fire department board put together a long-range financial plan for the fire department's capital and operating of the department. From a perspective of the facilities, 3 of our 5 stations were included in that next 10-year plan, so to speak, to remodel or replace them. They had been long needed some capital improvement and some love and care. So we have worked through 2 of those stations in the last couple of years, the Shorewood station included, and then in Whitefish Bay. And we're now at the point where we are working on design of updates to the Glendale facility. That is currently in the hands of architect and engineers, and specs are being put together to send out to bid, hopefully in the next 30 days. One of the things that we have included as an alternate in that bid is to look at the cost of co-locating office space with the North Shore Health Department. The North Shore Health Department has 2 current offices, one in Shorewood and one in Brown Deer. Neither of their spaces are large enough to accommodate their staff. And I had worked with Becky, the current director, and Ann, the previous director, and Ann had been working on this for quite a while to look at ways to create a single office space for her staff. And the opportunity has come up in this project as a potential because of the physical ground space that is at that location. And also, I think we really learned a lot through the COVID pandemic as to the synergies that our 2 organizations have together when it looks at public safety, public health, and emergency preparedness. And the benefits of co-locating our staff, that we could take advantage of some of the overlap and things we do. A lot of the patients that our EMS providers see on a regular basis are the same people that the health department is seeing. And if they're not seeing them, they are the ones that could help them better than some of our EMS providers, because these are people who have larger social and longer term care needs. And medical EMS providers really, that's not our cup of tea. We can help, but what we found is those people are better assisted through health department, social work, and case management type of people. So the facility that is being designed has an alternate space bid for 3,500 square feet that will be bid. And once the bids are open, we'll know the results of that, but that would be space that the health department could use and co-locate with us. Right now, our funding mechanism from the fire department side is we have debt service expiring from fire station projects about 20 years ago. So that debt is coming to an expiration, and that provides some capacity for starting some new projects, and that's how we funded the first two projects. This would sort of finish that out. And the health department has a couple different funding mechanisms, including some grant funding and ARPA funding, and some operating reserves that they could put into the project. So one of the things that needs to be considered in this is that the North Shore Health Department agreement has some language in it that would need to be amended to make all this happen. If this bid becomes to fruition, the project is financially feasible, but because of the impacts of the economy and the industry and construction, there are short windows to make commitments to contracts, shorter than have ever been there before. Normally, contractors will allow 60 days to commit to contracts after bids are open. We have seen in some other places 7-day commitments in the recent couple months. We're seeing more 60-day commitments, but we wanted to be ahead of that. So we weren't in a position, or you weren't in a position where we were asking for a quick decision. So what the issue on the health department agreement is the funding formula for the health department splits costs and has a factor for location of an office space. That has been in that agreement for a long time. And I think the 7 municipal managers and administrator have concurred that that funding formula needs an update and a refresh. And this probably is the time to do it, because it would be cost neutral for 6 of the 7 municipalities. The one not cost neutral is Whitefish Bay. They go up very slightly, but to explain that, I'll turn it over to Becky from the health department. She's here with me.
Hi, good evening. So just to refresh folks, the current North Shore Health Department funding formula is based on an algorithm that combines utilization and population, but utilization has historically only been based upon communicable disease investigations, which only really represents like 12% of the work that the health department does. And then, as the chief mentioned, Brown Deer and Shorewood currently pay adjusted rates because we have offices located in both of those municipalities, but we just don't have enough space to all be in one facility. And we know that that will really increase our efficiency and our ability to collaborate. So what is proposed and what's been proposed to the village managers and city administrator is to adopt a per capita funding model that, like the chief said, is cost neutral for 6 of the 7 municipalities. But really this will reinforce the concept that everyone needs and benefits from public health in the same way that they need and benefit from fire and rescue services. And then in addition, because we're proposing this per capita model, the numbers are really across the board are less for every municipality and very low compared to the Milwaukee County per resident. So in addition, I'm committed as the health officer to making up any difference in grant funding. And I'm, for the record, very ambitious about getting lots of money to provide the most pertinent services to the North Shore community. So currently the hiccup is that the North Shore funding formula is set in contract to go through 2023. Brown Deer is willing to adjust our current administrative fee. We currently spend $25,000 on admin. We spend $15,000 to Brown Deer on rent and $15,000 roughly to Shorewood on rent. Brown Deer would remain our fiscal agent and has agreed to do the administrative component of the work for $15,000 moving forward. What we wanted to put on the radar was that the shift will require a 1-year agreement for 2024. So a finite agreement that will include a proposed fixed percentage increase just to absorb cost of living changes, and then align with the proposed build and move to Glendale in 2024. So in summary, we would like to carry on through 2023 as is, shift and create a 1-year agreement in 2024 with just a cost of living adjustment. And then moving forward in 2025, we would fund per capita. Happy to take questions.
Just to be clear, there is no action on this tonight, correct?
Correct. It's informational only.
Okay. Trustee Stokebrand?
Thank you for the presentation. So it looks to me like financially, the village saves $32,000 a year. Is that correct?
That's what's proposed, correct?
And so this would be the formula beginning in 2025,
Correct.
but we lose a local health department, a presence in our community.
Well, I'd like to, highlight that we will still be present in the community, but yes, we would move from the Shorewood location and consolidate Brown Deer and Shorewood into Glendale. The hope and the desire there is to be more centrally located in the North Shore and co-locate with North Shore Fire.
So I understand the savings of consolidation, but as usual, there's always, the flip side is, how are you going to help people in our community if you're not in our community? Would you have any presence? Would you come any days of the week, or is there a bus line? How would somebody get to, is the new fire station on a bus line? How would someone get your services?
Yeah, that location is about 3 blocks from a bus line. One of the things I guess I'd like to highlight in this discussion is that the health department services, I think the model of what was a health department, the health department is a service that comes out, and one of the, comes out to the person needing the service. There's not a lot of people coming to the window, so to speak, for health department services. And one of the models that I see definitely as a future looking forward is the co-location of the health department with fire and EMS is not just at the Glendale station, but all 5 of our stations. So utilizing those fire station and EMS station facilities to offer, let's say there was a service need in Shorewood, that to co-locate and have space available in the existing building where the health department staff person could come in and have some sort of clinic, office hours, or something like that.
So you're saying, like, let's take COVID, vaccinations and such. So you're saying you'd use the fire stations as a vaccination site?
Well, one of the things that, yeah, we could do that. There's, each station is laid out a little different. We'd have to consider each case. COVID, we had to limit people coming into certain areas of the public buildings. But one of the design features of the facility in Glendale is a joint use room where you could hold a vaccination clinic. That could be a dedicated space, not a space that's being used by other groups at the same time, which creates some challenges with disease movement and infected people and non-infected people and things like that.
Yeah, and just for the record, we're very committed to being out in the community. Certainly the work of public health is not happening in the cubes that are in this space that we're currently in, right? Like we're invested in being integrated into the North Shore. And so yes, the answer is that vaccine clinic will happen in wherever anyone will host us, right? Maybe in the library, maybe in the space in the library where we've been hosting vaccine clinics for the last year. But we're happy to be out and about and on the road. That's, I think, the work of Public Health 3.0.
So then would you increase like vehicles, staff?
Yeah, so one of the things that Chief mentioned is that we're in a really good financial shape right now with some of our COVID dollars have really helped us increase our tax levy fund, and some of our ARPA money, which is the Recovery Act dollars, are really allowing us to invest in infrastructure, which is how we plan to build. And so based on the projected costs at this time, even with the standard deviation of the unknown inflation, we're looking pretty good to be able to purchase additional vehicles in addition to building.
Thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Kudo?
So I understand that we'll be saving money per capita in the new model. 2 questions. One, what department sees those savings for the village? And then what department is seeing the reduction of $15,000 a year from the loss of rent? Maybe that's a Mark question.
Yeah, I'm
sure.
not sure on either of those. I defer to Chris, or I thought I saw Mark there earlier.
I think we're grabbing Mark right now.
Okay.
I can defer to once Becky returns, but maybe I can also grab Mark if he has
I
information.
know one thing that we've talked about is that Shorewood is confident that they will be able to re-rent the space that's currently occupied by the health department. So losing our $15,000 of rent currently doesn't necessarily mean it's lost for good. Can you repeat your first question though? I'm not sure I.
Sure. I mean, so the question, and Mark's now back in the room, but the question is, I know that we're saving money on the per capita for North Shore Health Department on the new funding formula. But one, what department is saving that money? The per capita money, or what account is saving the per capita money? And then the second question is, with the perhaps temporary reduction of $15,000 in rent, what entity is losing that $15,000 until it's rented out?
Both of those accounts will fall into the other public safety budget and the general fund. So they'll kind of net out against each other. And then kind of in the long term, what we do with that space was something we'll have to figure out.
Okay. Thank you.
Do any other trustees have any questions? All right. Well, unless there's anything else, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
All right. Next item on special order of business is consider North Oakland reconstruction design and Kensington / Oakland traffic signal option. Here, I'd like Trustee Ursink to give an overview of the discussion on this so far, and if also if Mr. Amir can address two topics, just at least up front as it relates to what the issues have been, or some of the questions have been around bump outs, and of course the question of the traffic signal. So Arthur.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Arnsdorfer. So we have, as a Public Works Committee, have been talking about this project for the past 3-4 months. It's the reconstruction of North Oakland Avenue. So that spans from Capitol all the way to Glendale, or Capitol all the way to Kensington. And, I think our real focus on this project has been public safety, pedestrian safety. And, so you'll see in a lot of these designs that we've been working on, you'll see bump outs. Bump outs are a big deterrent for, or a big traffic calming sort of measure. And there's other little, so we've also focused on green infrastructure. That's been another element. So public safety, green infrastructure, two big elements that we've focused on here. We feel like it's a goal of our community. It's a goal of our board to make sure that that we're doing everything we can in these areas. And then we came across one particular topic, which is a traffic signal at Kensington. I think it was recommended in our traffic study that we did back in 2019, 2020, that was recommended for that area. And I think we all went back and forth on it. Is it necessary? We've talked to so many people within the community. We talked about it as a board. We talked about it as a smaller committee. And we really couldn't reach consensus. And, as DPW chair, I struggle with this one. I went back and forth, and I think, where we ended was the question was posed, is this make it safer for pedestrians? And if the answer is yes, it's something we should do. And the answer is, potentially yes. But I think, we still couldn't reach consensus on this topic. We decided to put it to the public. And I think I give the village manager a lot of credit and village staff for putting this out there, for getting the feedback, because we got the feedback to the tune of about 500 responses. And it was overwhelmingly, we don't need a traffic light at Kensington. So, I think we're back here today in this room. This is on the agenda. And, I really look forward to hearing kind of what trustees have to say about it, what our engineer Mustafa has to say about it. And, and then we'll have that conversation. And I think tonight we are scheduled to vote on the traffic light at Kensington. Is that correct? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's two options of proceeding with the
Yep.
plan, one with the traffic signal, one without the traffic.
Right,
signal,
exactly.
or-
So-
Or some permutation thereof.
So that's kind of a brief overview, but I can let our engineer here, Mustafa, take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mustafa Emir. I'm with Clark Dietz, and we've been working on the design of Oakland Avenue during this year. And as the chairman pointed out, I think that we reached consensus relatively quickly on traffic calming and sort of creating a safer space for pedestrians crossing Oakland by using bump outs. These are going to enhance the look, enhance the safety of the place. In your packets, there are block by block descriptions of where we thought they would be most appropriate. There's a total of 20 of them throughout the corridor, the northernmost ones being at the south end of Glendale Avenue. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions with regards to those. But I'm happy to say that I thought that was a good place for both the committee and my team of engineers. We arrived at a good place. As Mr. Chairman described, I've flipped on this traffic signal a couple of times. I was originally against, I was then for, and now the survey perhaps sort of becomes the decisive element. But I would like to hear what else is on your minds. Your packet also includes a very detailed memo by Director Bushlick, who's laid out essentially what we've been talking about on the technical side of things, from idling cars to sort of people getting impatient during the middle of their day, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll find those there, food for thought. So I guess in my mind, and I think from the technical team's standpoint, that decision seems to be the only one between us sort of and making this sort of the design happen by the end of the year so that you can build this thing in 2025.
Okay. I had one question that came up from a resident. Have we evaluated whether these bump outs would have any impact on the bike race, the criterion from a safety perspective on some of the turns?
No, in all cases, the extent of the bump outs are always preserving the existing bike lane. So for a visual effect, we're not sort of bumping through the bike lane. And you might also point out to people sort of trying to visualize that many of our streets already have bump outs on Oakland. So if you don't, so there will be one continuous curve. I would say a person laying out a race course should be able to work with them.
Okay, thank you. Do any other trustees have any questions they need to or need answered before making a decision? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I will.
We want to do public comments,
What's that?
public comments before, or do we want to?
I'm sorry, I was going to take them after the
Oh, okay.
the motion, but
Oh, okay. So motion first and then, because I
Right.
assume that we have some folks here to
yeah,
offer feedback. Okay.
or we could do it now. It's fine. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Come forward, state your name and address at the mic.
And make sure you speak into the mic.
Really into the mic.
Thank you. Nice and close. Cool. I'm Todd DuBois. I live at 1908 East Kensington. So we're a block and a half, 2 blocks from the intersection there. I guess we spoke at the meeting and we sent an email, so I'm sure most of you guys know what my wife and I feel, but we're obviously against the light. We don't really feel it'll increase safety while maybe increase pedestrian safe and cross in Oakland. I do think it has adverse consequences in other areas, speed of cars down Oakland and particularly our street, Kensington. Our other concern with the whole project, the bump outs and the calming of traffic on Oakland, is just that we currently feel that traffic down Murray and Morris is already increasing from the stops that people have to make on Oakland. So I'd like to see, or in the future, that there'd be some effect just traffic on Murray and Morris as well. We're not against slowing Oakland down. We just want to make sure that there's some sort of plan, because I mean, like even today, I had cars tailgating me as I'm going down Murray, just trying to cut through the village. So just wanted. You mentioned the bike race. We were kind of wondering about the bump outs and the turns there. Would it make it difficult? But got that. I think that was pretty much it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other members of the public here like to speak? Or anyone join us remotely? All right. Seeing none, Arthur?
Yeah, so I'd like to move to approve the engineer's recommended roadway design for the 2025 reconstruction of North Oakland Avenue to include the identified pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle safety improvements and green infrastructure enhancements with no traffic control signals at the intersection of East Kensington Boulevard.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just something to say, I've thought about this quite a bit. I go through that intersection all the time. I spent a lot of time asking my neighbors and friends in the area about that intersection. And it's been a tough decision to get to. I mean, up to this point, I've been about 50-50 split either way. And now I'm 51%, 49% this direction. I think there's pros and cons to both, but I think, my concerns are really with the traffic backup on Kensington when the east-west light is red, the concerted speed of cars going when they're catching a green light, particularly on Oakland. That's a long stretch without any stop from Hampton over. And then from the pedestrian perspective, one of the nice things about the stop signs is it's pedestrian right of way all the time. There, you don't have to, as a pedestrian, you don't have to wait for a red light. You are just always allowed to cross. And so to give pedestrians that benefit, with the flip side being sometimes cars don't exactly stop as they should. I think with the additional traffic calming measures and the bump outs, that will increase cars slowing down and stopping at that intersection to make it safe enough for pedestrians to keep that benefit. So that's why I'm opposed to the traffic lights at this point.
Trustee Kudo?
I would have to agree quite a bit with Trustee Lynn. This was maybe a little bit easier for me because I live so close to this intersection, and I've suffered from Lake Bluff cars trying to make the Lake Bluff Oakland light and speeding past Murray. The stretch that you have of uncontrolled intersection between Frederick and Oakland Avenue made this pretty easy. I appreciate that everyone has to stop. I appreciate that it doesn't back up traffic on Oakland Avenue or on, and I just think it's an easy flow intersection. Hasn't had any problems. So while I do understand, some position that they would like a stoplight, I'm going to be voting yes with the motion to move forth with.
All right. President McKay?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to all the people that participated in the survey, either online or through the village manager's memo. I was really surprised at how little support there was for a light at this intersection. And so I appreciated that guidance from the community in this regard. And so I am prepared to support this motion as presented.
Okay, I see a member of the public. Is their hand raised? You state your name and address. Okay.
Yes, hi, my apologies. I'm fumbling through the Zoom meeting here via my phone call. But my name is Ken Schmitzlamers. I've lived in Shorewood, previously down on Capitol Drive, but I've moved up to 4483 and 4481 North Murray, which is just right around the corner from the intersection. And I'd like to thank you all for looking at all of this. I personally, as well as my girlfriend, my mom who lives here as well, we were opposing against this traffic light for various reasons. But I guess my only question or consideration that I would have down the road with the planners is to maybe see a couple upgrades on signage, like stop signs with LED lights around them at that corner of Murray and Kensington, just to kind of make it more apparent that there's a stop sign, because sometimes it can appear to be missed. Well, thank you very much, all of you. And I'm gonna try to figure out how to log out.
Thank you. All right. We can do a voice vote on this. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you. This was very, very helpful, and I appreciate finally changing my mind also.
All right, next item on the agenda is consent. The consent agenda item. Is there a motion to approve items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Take a voice vote on this one. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. All right. Well, I mumbled my way through that one. My apologies. So yes, motion carries 7-0. There's no public hearing this evening. Next item is citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard? Okay, seeing none, I believe we can move on to new business. The first item on the new business agenda, the robust new business agenda, is consider installation of parking meters. And to clarify, this is not, we're not voting on installing parking meters. This is just staff seeking direction and I believe trustees, directors, Griebentrog and Madison presenting on this.
All right, thank you very much. We previously had an informal discussion on whether or not the village board would like to find out more information on the options of considering potential parking meters within the Oakland Avenue and Capitol Drive corridors. The memo provides you some additional information for your review and consideration. And really, we just looking to affirm that we should move forward in this process or not. And we outline a couple of factors that would be part of that decision-making process. One of that would be a revenue review study from TID 5 to firm up our projections at staff level to see if that also makes sense for you to consider moving forward at a future date.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the director? Trustee Ursink?
Let's say we move forward with this project. Do we have an idea of where the revenue from these parking meters would go and how we'd like to utilize it?
You may have a lot of ideas, and I'm willing to entertain all of them.
Fantastic.
Trustee Stokebrand?
I'm just trying to understand the number of the density of parking where it's determined by some people to be a feasible or a good idea. I saw somewhere near an 85% occupancy target ensures that street parking spaces available and utilized by the meter company. But I believe our parking study earlier had shown we had a 35% occupancy rate, but there was perhaps some discrepancy between what the information that was included in the parking study. Is that?
Sure. Let me start by, and Bart, you correct me if I get off topic. The parking study looked at parking, on-street parking availability in general, and that included both Oakland and Capitol, plus 2 blocks either side of that. So as you might imagine, a lot of empty spaces in that 2 blocks either side of Oakland and Capitol that reduced those numbers to that 30% number that was indicated in that study.
So then, like, for example, if you take Oakland North and South, are you saying Jarvis, like the side streets and the ones that are parallel to it also 2 blocks? You know what I'm saying? When you say
That's what the transportation study did.
all that whole area. So
they were just looking at parking availability. It really wasn't focused on, I don't believe it was focused directly on parking meters.
it'd be like perpendicular and parallel. It's a lot of space, right?
So
And that's why it perhaps may skew low. Is that what
that's correct. So the second set of data is Dr. Griepentrag was able to get the specific detail information from that study, and that's in the table on the second page of that memo. So that focuses in more concisely just on the Oakland and Capitol Drive corridors proper. So that table shows a number of indications at 3 different times of day and what the average occupancy of those parking spaces were. Bart, did that go through the entire Oakland corridor all the way to? So that also went all the way to the north end of town, which, as you may imagine, is slightly diminished as well once you get outside our Capitol and Oakland Avenue intersection. That's further north is a little less demand on parking. And then the third data point in this refers to 85% occupancy is a target for parking meters to promote turnover, space turnover. Is that correct, Bart? Am I interpreting that? That's another benchmark when you're looking at parking meters for the sole, or I shouldn't say for the sole purpose, for the purpose of promoting turnover on the street or within those parking permit areas. That 85% is a standard within the planning community for those types of decisions. So you have 3 different sets of numbers, depending on what perspective you want to evaluate the overall parking and the need or potential need to consider for parking meters in those areas.
Any other trustees have questions?
I have a question. So, and if I'm just, oh, never mind. I am missing, I was missing something. I see my question answered now. Never mind.
All right. Trustee Ursink?
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I see the chief here. I'm wondering if we've reviewed this plan or spoken with the police department about the implications of parking meters in Shorewood and how we work together on that if they have capacity to help with that.
You wanna, I can say something, correct me. We did previously discuss this with Chief Nimmer. I know we've had informal discussions about the ability of existing staff to enforce metered restrictions, and I believe that those discussions were affirmed that existing staff could do that if those was the implementation. Were you involved at that, in any of those levels of discussion?
I would imagine it would probably make the parking checkers' life a little easier, having a meter that kind of says when a car has been there past a certain amount of time.
Well, I can tell you from what I know is my understanding is extremely difficult to enforce time restricted parking zones in our community.
Thank you.
All right. President McKeag.
Thank you. So the question before us tonight is to give direction to conduct a high-level analysis to see basically if the demand would substantiate a revenue driving. Basically, we could, if we don't have the demand.
Losing your signal. Can't hear you.
We lost your sound. If you can hear us.
I wonder if she's referring to that occupancy target. Is that what you're referring to when you talk about demand?
Yes.
Thumbs down, the occupancy target.
We can hear you now.
Yes. So basically, just the action we're being asked for tonight is to approve a high-level analysis to see if this is a cost benefit.
That's generally my understanding, and that's predicated on the board as a body being interested in pursuing the matter at all.
Okay. I'm not interested if it's not going to generate revenue, but I think we have to take a step to get there. Thank you.
Trustee Kudo.
Honestly, I'm not interested whether or not generate revenue. We've already seen that the occupancy numbers don't necessarily require, based on one of those parameters, parking meters. I've never had, I mean, I've lived here quite some time. I've never had a problem finding parking on Oakland. I've never had a problem finding parking on Capitol Drive. If we want to continue to be an open, welcoming community and have folks use our businesses and come and go, I would prefer that we try to find revenue somewhere else. Having just come out of COVID, having all those currently empty storefronts that we're trying to put people in and trying to put business, trying to promote, the downtown of Shorewood. There's plenty of parking in other places. I've never had a problem. And so I don't see why taxing, call it whatever we want, a fee or a tax, taxing our residents to park on their own streets, or taxing, businesses, customers to park on our streets, does anything to keep Shorewood, the sort of livable community that we want to be. So, I mean, we can take a look at it. Unless something magical happens, I'm going to be a no in the long run, but I'm a no right now. I don't see the logic behind it.
Trustee Lynn, did you have your hand raised?
I did, but so does there.
You can go.
Okay. So just a couple, I'm not necessarily unilaterally opposed to the idea. I, generally like the idea of, as much as we can, encouraging more people to walk, bike, et cetera. That's sort of my MO. But and I think, when I tend to go park somewhere, a lot of times I kind of try to park on the side streets to keep some of those busier areas open still. And I know that could be helpful for some people, trying to encourage more people to kind of park on the unmetered spots to maybe free up some of the areas closer. So I kind of get that perspective. But, if we were going to do this, I think we'd also have to look at a combined, leaving some spaces with no meter that would be designated, say, senior citizen, family parking, more disabled parking spaces. It'd have to be done in a way that provides more accessibility and more guaranteed accessibility for the people who need it in the long run. So, I mean, I'm leaning a little bit against it, but that's just kind of my thoughts for the moment.
Yeah, I may. I'm not opposed to, if we went that far, I would absolutely want to leave spaces open, but I do think that puts an undue burden on staff, on parking checkers, on those folks to then monitor who's parking in those spots. So, I mean, again, it solves one problem, but causes another one, for our staff down the road. No pun intended.
Trustee Stokebrand.
I'm just wondering if the bid has ever weighed in on this. I would like them to take a vote. I would really like to know how they feel about this, because it's so important to their model. I was really disappointed to see that the Whitefish Bay model, the payback was 17 years. But I wonder, I am curious to see if you went totally digital, if I know people unlock their bikes with their phone now, and if you can use your phone and not have that huge payment, the infrastructure installment cost. But I understand that could be paid with TID money. I guess I'm just wondering, I don't have enough information to really know yet. And I think if staff made an interesting point, what if you just did it in a defined geographic area? Let's say, someone mentioned the 2 blocks between Lake Bluff and Kensington to encourage churn. So, maybe people are thinking, well, I'm ready to leave. If I leave, someone else gets my spot. I don't know. And maybe, on the south end, I'm trying to think what restaurants. I would like to know from the business owners, do you see this more as a help or a hindrance? And I would like to see financial feasibility in terms of, so Mark said it's difficult for staff to enforce time limitations. So that's what this would be, right? This would just be another time limitation.
Well, the meter is very definitive enforcement, lends itself to enforcement because either the meter is in place or it's expired. So
it's easier.
Yeah, this is a very straightforward enforcement issue. Again, we're not looking. The context of the original discussion is revenue opportunities to diversify funding away from property taxes. So if the board is interested in doing a study to talk about and address a lot of the questions I've heard, then we've got 4 bullet points that we'd like guidance on to help define that study. And then we'll go ahead and do it and come back and give you some more information.
And so is the question, would we fund a study, or would the staff on their own be able to come up with the information?
The proposal is to fund a study.
Trustee Ursink.
I just wanted to give one example of where revenue could possibly go. And it's in the conversation with the resurfacing or the reconstruction of North Oakland Avenue. We've been talking to the bid about helping with snow removal, because snow removal is not going to be something that DPW is they're not going to be able to get in between the bump outs. So it becomes problematic. And they've approached the bid about helping financially, be able to remove that snow from those bump outs. This could be a revenue, this could be a model for helping those businesses remove that snow and help pay for that particular project. So I think there's opportunities within this that I'd love to go through the process and hear, what is achievable, what we can do with these funds, how much revenue we could project to get in, because something that could be very helpful. If the bid isn't able to help out, which it sounds like, with the holiday decorations that they're going to be paying for this year, a lot of the money that they have set aside is going to be used up. So they're not going to be able to fund snow removal for the bump outs when they're created. So we'll have to look at, we'll have to look at that, and that could be a significant cost to the taxpayer. And if this could help offset that cost, that could be helpful. So I think personally, I'd love to go down the path and see what this would look like and if it would be beneficial for the community.
Thank you. Would any members of the public like to speak?
And obviously you guys are pretty early, so, but my 2 comments to trustee Kudos is the revenue. The only thing I didn't hear as we're talking was, talked about the occupancy rates, but if you add meters on Oakland, isn't that just going to push people to park side streets? So now you have more residents, have strangers parking in front of their houses. That kind of becomes so.
Thank you.
Can I say one more? I would want to know, even if, like trustee Sopran said, if the bid is interested, if the bid wants this, that would make me more open to wanting it. But if they don't want it, then I'm wondering who really would want it then. So that's just kind of my thought.
Trustee Kudo.
Probably my last thing. We just did a community survey for a stoplight. I don't see why, if we move forward with some sort of process of exploring this, I would be adamant that we would have to do a community survey to get, the villagers' input as to whether or not they want parking meters on this stretch.
All right, President McCaig, then we'll make a motion.
Yeah, I've really never been interested in this. I always feel obligated to get as much information as possible about diversifying.
Lost you again.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I don't think you could hear me.
No,
we can
now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have never been interested in this. I feel obligated always to get the information about diversifying revenue streams, but I can't see myself voting for it.
All right. Thank you. All right. If I may, I'll make the motion. I move to further consider parking meters, consider meters on Oakland Avenue and Capitol Avenue, consider single meter or shared meter and or parking app, and conduct a cost revenue analysis funded by TID 5.
Second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Stokbrand.
I just wanted to point out that I think was it the bike and pedestrian safety study that pointed out that you're encouraging people to use cars if you make parking free, that the green thing to do is to make there be a cost for using your car. It's just something I thought I would mention. I don't know. It just, to me, it's the people that are going to drive and they're just going to park somewhere else. I don't know, but I am curious to see the revenue piece, especially if you go with a low install cost and it's all done with the phones.
I actually have one question before we go forward. Do we have any idea how much the study will cost?
That's an outstanding question.
Because I
was
very much like to
thinking-
know that before we take a vote.
I was thinking at staff level discussion, a number I recall was about $20,000 to do the type of in-depth study to give you the information you might need for additional consideration. But I don't see it in the memo. I didn't draft this memo, so.
If you
But
put
that
out
was
the
my
RFP, you
recollection.
could always, not act on.
Mhm. I mean, I'm generally for, you know, understanding more ways to potentially realize new revenues. But that it just seems like that's a lot of money to put into a study when we don't know that there's community support for it, or support from the bid. So I'm just curious if that's something I hate to like push things out to later dates, but is this something that we want to get feedback from the community and business owners and then revisit? Because like I said, I'd hate to spend a lot of money on a study and then have people say, well, we absolutely don't want this anyway.
Director.
The only thing that I can add is the reason this is before you in the timeline it is, I mean, we have a construction project slated for North Oakland Avenue, north of Capitol. Plus, this is a fairly extensively lead time to implement. So if we're talking about the 2024 or 2025 budget cycle, and I'm happy to support, any path forward or not that the board has. But I mean, there are some implications to implementation time depending on the methods we choose to make those decisions.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Doesn't appear to be any further discussion. Trustee
So
Stokerbrand.
if we vote in favor of this, does that mean that the staff would put out an RFP, but then it would be up to us if we didn't want to approve the responses that came back? If we, in the meantime, did a community poll, I don't know, I think we're due for our 2019, every 3 years we do the community survey. And I know the whole point of that is consistency. So they don't usually add questions, but I'm just wondering if we voted yes on this, would the staff go out for an RFP and then we have another option to just not knowing how long it would take, how much staff time that would take, we would have the option to not take any of them.
Director.
Yeah, again, depending on exactly the estimated cost of the study would require whether we'd actually do an RFP or just staff would engage a consultant if it was under 10,000. But we can also do more than one thing at a time. We can start that process to gain that information. We can process the matter through the bid and through the community. I mean, there's no reason that we can't do all of those things if the board has any interest in considering this topic any further.
All right. Thank you.
Call the question.
All right. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
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 All right. So 4-3 nay, so. Okay.
Yeah, I move for a roll call.
All right. Let's do a roll call then.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
trustee Lynn,
Nay.
President McCaig,
Nay.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Nay.
trustee Moore Baldoff.
Nay.
Motion is denied by a vote of 4-3.
All right. All right, we'll move on to letter B. Consider crossing guard memorandum of understanding and service agreement.
There's a member of the public that has their hand raised. I don't know if you want to acknowledge that.
Member of the public would like to speak?
Yeah, this is David Menta, 4400 North Wildwood. Roll call vote requires suspension of the rules, which is a 4/5 vote.
There was a voice vote on the floor, which you couldn't, there was no way to indicate in the minutes.
I'm just going by, what it states in village code and how the board has operated in the past. Roll call vote requires suspension of the rules.
All right.
Go back. Is there unanimous consent?
Put the question to the board.
Sure.
All right. Is there unanimous consent for a roll call vote?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Move on to B. Consider crossing guard memorandum and understanding and service agreement. Chief Worth is on this one.
Thank you. The village has been in a contract with All City Management Services for crossing guards at 10 sites containing 11 total crossing guards since 2019. The contract expired in June of this year, and we are looking to considering the extension of such contract for crossing guard services at 10 sites utilizing 11 crossing guards. Also extending the memorandum of understanding with the school board, which delineates payment for those services at 50% for the village, 50% for the school board. I would note that there's a slight increase for services this year of about $12,000, which equates to just under $6,500 payment for the village. As I noted, there are 10 sites total, covered by 11 crossing guards, and I'm happy to answer any questions that arise.
Any questions from the board? Trustee Stokebrand?
Thank you for your work on this, first of all, Chief Worth. And my only concern here is that there's no price in the motion, and I understand the concern about a possible, I guess I'd like to somehow put some guardrails on this. And I know it's sort of the 11th hour, school starts before we meet again, perhaps. I was sometimes in our DPW contracts, we had like, I believe, a 10% alternate, option if prices increase. That's one thing I would offer. The other thing I was trying to figure out was, it looked like there was an item that the company wanted in here for if there's a municipal or state reason to increase the, if their wages were somehow increased by the state or local rule, which, sounds a little far-fetched to me, but if that's indeed the case, if we could put that qualifier in there, we do have the right, there's the parameters in here for canceling the contract, which is good, but approving a contract that says we could increase this and not saying how much or anything like that, just as a fiduciary, makes me nervous. I believe it said the contractor may request a price increase during the term as a result of any legally mandated increases in wages or benefits imposed in the state or municipality. I'm guessing that's pretty unlikely. And if that's in the language, I guess if it's in the letter here, does that mean it would be in the language? I wouldn't see any, I would like to have some reasons, parameters for them deciding to go beyond with, nothing to protect us.
So that would be like if the state legislature raised the minimum wage
They raised it.
over $15 an hour that we're already paying them. I
think
have
we're
a
safe.
feeling the current legislature would not do that, but I might be wrong. But no, but in all seriousness, I think if we, I mean, I agree, it's good to have that buffer window and have it into a range. But like, even if they said, oh, we need to pay our crossing guards $16 an hour. I mean, then we'd still just do it, you know, we still need the crossing guards. So I think unless it was like exorbitant amount where we would have to just cancel the contract altogether, which we can do from my understanding, then I'm okay with it as is.
Trustee Baldo?
I have a question. I know they kind of addressed this in their letter about hiring challenges. But has there been, you know, more conversation about what will happen in the instance that they can't fill the positions by the time school starts, or if they have, you know, people calling out sick, you know, regularly? What's the conversation been around that?
Their contract requires them to fill a position. So even in the event of a sick call, they have to find a crossing guard from someplace else to fill our spot contractually.
Okay. And then if, you know, for so many times that happens, we would be able to get out of the contract, or?
That I believe so. And that
Okay.
might be a question for Attorney Bayer, but there are parameters by which we can cancel
Okay.
the contract. And I believe that non-attendance is one of them.
Sure. I was just digging through, looking for that other provision as well. So just going back to the provision on if there were state or federal mandates associated with you know, increased wages or anything, that's pretty much exactly what you're talking about there. And it's not uncommon in a service contract like this where they're operating on relatively, you know, tight margins to stay competitive and get these bids in, to you know, to say, well, if our entire framework and structure is thrown off by the fact that the minimum wage just went up, you know, $5 an hour, $7 an hour, or $4 an hour, whatever it is, that you know, that they have the ability to pass some or all of that on to the end consumer. So that's why that's there, but it's a pretty very specific provision, and you know, they can't say, well, you know, well, our margins were such last fall that our profits were less than we anticipated, so we're just going to raise the rate. That's not the case. It's got to be a specific trigger that's enumerated there. So I really, and you know, the chances of that happening are probably 0%. But at any rate, so the other question relates to, you know, what happens if they can't fill the position, and you know, clearly they obviously they have an incentive to do that. They want to fill all of those spots because they want to provide good service, because they want to get awarded the contract the next time around. But the reality of it is, you know, the onus is on them under the written agreement to say, well, you know, we're going to ensure that we're going to provide guards for this amount of corners, for these hours, for these dates, you know, that the school is open. And if they don't do that, you know, that could be a breach of the agreement. And there's other provisions in the contract that absolutely give us rights as the consumer here, as the other party to the agreement, to say, well, you know, you're not performing, and we can give them formal notice. You know, we have the ability to either renegotiate or potentially search for another contractor. So yeah, if there was non-performance, you know, that might be grounds to void the contract or go back to the table and have further discussions with them about that. So that's one of the things we look at when we review these, is to make sure that there's some protections on the back end for the municipality if we've got a contractor who's doing a bad job.
All right. Thank you for that. Trustee Kudo?
Just a question regarding the Capitol Drive in Maryland. 4 hours, 2 crossing guards. Is that for Atwater and at Roberts? Is it increased amount of time? Roberts is there as well.
Correct.
Have there been any follow-up question? Have there been any conversations with St. Roberts about reimbursing the village for the additional costs for crossing guards?
Not to my knowledge.
Trustee Stokebrand?
That's a good point that we might want to think about. This is only 1-year contract, but I appreciate your point. So I'm ready to make a motion as suggested here.
There's a member of the public that had a question, so.
I just was going to say that I'm ready to make the motion and support it here. I'm a little concerned that we didn't go out for bids, but I understand this is a tight market. And the price increase seems reasonable. It looks to me like about 10% from last year, which given inflation and especially in the wages, it all seems reasonable.
Thank you. See, a member of the public has a question if you, or wants to speak, if you could state your name and address.
Hello there. My name is Adrian Beccaro, 1606 East Menlo Boulevard. I was just curious, we mentioned at the start of this topic, like a $12,000 cost. I was just curious, like what the, like as a percent, or like how much is the whole contract? Like how much are we even talking about here, like relative to the whole thing?
It's noted in the memo that the entire contract is $104,000.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Would anyone like to make a motion? Trustee Stokemeyer.
I move to approve the one-year memorandum of understanding with the Shorewood School District and the one-year agreement for crossing guard services with all city management services as presented.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? It sounds like 7-0. Thank you. Item C, also with Chief Worth, consider reclassification of police officer position to police sergeant. This item came up to the Committee of Public Safety earlier. It was approved 3-0. Chief Worth, if you'd like to explain it to the whole board.
Thank you. The motion is to reclassify a police officer position to the position of police sergeant. The department has been operating under the staffing model of 14 police officers, 5 sergeants, 1 acting sergeant, 2 captains, 1's currently vacant, and then the chief. The idea behind the reclassification is to create a sergeant's position and move that acting sergeant on the early shift, which operates 2:45 p.m. to 11 p.m., promote them into a full sergeant's position and maintain the staffing that we have of officers at 14. The idea behind the reclassification of the police officer position is to remain consistency of supervision across all 3 shifts. There are currently 2 sergeants on the day shift, 2 sergeants on the late shift, 1 sergeant, and an acting sergeant on the early shift. The early shift also has the greatest number of officers assigned to it. The minimum staffing is greater than that of the early shift and the night shift. It also has the officers who are the newest to the department and maybe in most need of guidance. We did an analysis in the shifts that were covered by the acting sergeant as a sergeant position. There was approximately 108 shifts to the tune of about $60,000 that were saved by that acting sergeant acting as a sergeant capacity, because there is a requirement that 1 sergeant staff every shift. That's mandatory. As to the staffing level for the number of officers, we found that there is no distinct disadvantage. Of course, we would like to have more officers, but there's no distinct disadvantage to the number of officers that are currently staffed and moving forward, remaining at that staffing. The benefit is that sergeants can and often do act as police officers responding to calls for service. Police officers in turn cannot act as police sergeants and provide the level of supervision and guidance that is my expectation. Lastly, I'd just like to note that the union contract, section 1.01 states that it shall remain the unchallenged power of the village board to create additional supervisory personnel as they deem necessary. Secondarily, in section 2.01 of the union contract, it states such powers and authority in general include, but are not limited to, the right to determine the services and level of services offered by the village, to establish, continue, abolish, or alter policies, practices, or procedures for the operation of the village to determine the number and types of employees required and to increase or decrease the number of employees accordingly. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any members of the board have questions? Would any members of the public like to speak at this time? All right, seeing none. All right, trustee Ursink.
Sure, I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the reclassification of a police officer to police sergeant and approve the organizational chart changes to reflect 6 sergeants and 14 police officers.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item D, consider resolution 2022-08, amending fees within the village fee schedule. This is Finance Director Manuelson.
One of the things staff will do on an annual basis is take a look at the fee schedule. We did so again this year. During that process, staff identified a number of omissions, a couple of new fees, and a couple of fee adjustments for consistency, particularly within planning departments and the minimum fee. The proposed resolution will make those changes, and the other clerical enumerations as identified in the red line version of the fee schedule, and we seek your approval.
It's the question I had. Where did the what was the impetus for the pawnbroker item?
It's my understanding that was in ordinance and was just not on the schedule.
Got it. Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions for the director? Would any members of the public like to speak? Oh, trustee Baldoff.
I'm just curious, is there expected to be much of a fiscal impact with these changes or not really?
No,
Okay.
it's mostly clerical at this point.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Would any members of the public like to speak at this point? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Move to approve resolution 2022-8, amending fees with.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Oh, sorry, actually, I do just have one other question / clarification on the solar fee. Is that a new one or is that just, also?
That is no fee.
And do we have any idea of what the impact is, like how many homes, or is that something that's pretty standard that we're seeing communities add it?
So we currently charge just the basic electrical permit fee for that. So this is based on the actual.
Okay, so just mirror.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a more accurate reflection of the charge.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
It's a resolution, I believe, that requires roll call.
That's right. Thank you for that. I did have that marked on the agenda and I missed that. So thank you for the catch. We'll do a roll call vote as noted.
Trustee Kudo,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
President McCaig,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Moore Baldoff.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, consider amendment to policy 32, conducting hybrid and video recording public meetings. Director Griebentraub.
Thank you, Chair Arndorfer. So on behalf of Village Manager Ewald, before you tonight is an amendment to the existing policy 32, conducting hybrid and video recording public meeting amendment. As you'll recall, in April, we adopted the current policy that was largely a trial basis with the new technology that we have here.
We are at the point now where we believe we can expand offering hybrid meetings to all other recorded meetings, which are Plan Commission, the CDA, and the Police Commission. And so with the adoption of this amended policy, as of August 8th, all those meetings would become hybrid. The other clarification within here is, should the technology fail, the meeting would continue to function. So in the current iteration of the policy, if the technology fails, we have to adjourn the meeting. I believe we've received legal guidance that that's not necessarily necessary. And so if for some reason the technology fails, people have been advised that the meeting is in person, they had the opportunity to join it. So what is before us tonight would expand hybrid opportunities to those other three committees and clarify any technological issues.
All right. Thank you, Director Griebentrog. Any trustees have any questions? Would any members of the public like to speak at this time? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the amendments to policy 32, conducting hybrid and video recording public meetings.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Director Griebentrog. All right, next item, consider steps to explore a new public works facility. I believe that's Director Emanuelson. All right.
I don't have my name on it.
Or,
How about Leanne? How about you take it?
all right.
I will do my best.
Proceed, sure.
So, as I understand it, the request before you this evening is essentially to start upon a path, which includes a request for proposals to explore the viability of a public works facility on a site alternate to the current site. Again, as I understand it, it becomes a bit of a checkbox to determine whether that is in fact a viable alternative among the alternatives that we are discovering or exploring, excuse me. And if the answer to that becomes yes, ultimately, we obviously have multiple paths to choose from. If the answer to that is no, then our path selection becomes quite a bit narrow. But again, as I understand it, what the question before you this evening is to approve the drafting of an RFP to begin site or firm selection for that site viability process. The recommended motion actually addresses how those steps would be funded through either a 2023 capital budget allocation or the use of ARPA reserve. Mark's nodding. That must be relative.
All right. Thank you. Any trustees have any questions for the director? Trustee Kudo.
I do. I know this just sort of came back from the last meeting. This is the next logical step. One question I wish I had asked in the last meeting that I didn't was why can't we do both moving and staying at the same time? Why can't we look at the feasibility of staying in the same spot as well as moving to a different location at the same time? Because in my mind, if we get to the end of looking at a new spot and there isn't a new spot or there isn't anything we can do, we have to start this process all the way over again, which means coming back and then looking at staying in the same spot.
All right. Trustee Emanuelson, can you take the mic?
You think it's a
Is that a
promotion?
promotion?
Boy, do you know.
That is definitely not a promotion,
my friend.
The space needs analysis will encompass both alternate sites and the existing facility site.
Okay, so it'll be both.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I wish I'd asked it last time, and I'm glad I asked it this time.
Trustee Ursink.
Yeah, I just see in the suggested motion that we have ARPA reserves in here, but I don't see capital. Is that, before I make the motion, I'd like to just, I think the ARPA reserves make sense, but I do see as identified above. Want some clarity on that motion.
Yeah, the motion is worded that way to provide flexibility that if it's not approved later tonight for ARPA reserves, that we would bring it forward to the board in the 2023 budget for the capital request.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. Trustee Ursink. I'm sorry, Trustee Stoker-Brown.
I wonder if there's some language that would be included here that would make it very clear that we're not just looking at an alternate site. What language could be added to make it clear that we're looking at both sites at the same time?
I believe that language would be included in the proposed RFP for the consulting firm to do those engagements.
It says site feasibility and new public works facility. It doesn't mention any, it doesn't mention anything about relocation. So I think it's pretty broad.
Could we just say like site feasibility for Shorewood's public works facility? Because it's going to be ours, whether it's on the same site or a new site. Does that satisfy what people want to clarify without making it too clunky?
I mean, I personally think the language works as is, but.
Well, yeah, that was my clarification too, was that, which now I'm clarified, but because the motion says site feasibility, which I assumed any site being feasible, but then in the actual background, it kind of was more so talking about the other sites. So I had that kind of same confusion, but I think the motion itself, by saying site feasibility, I'm thinking that as any site, including our current site.
Yeah.
Well,
Trustee
otherwise, I
Stoker-Brown.
would be very happy to, because it says as identified above, and then it seems to me most of the references above are all to a different site. So it'd be very easy for me to make a motion that in Shorewood, in the village or elsewhere.
Sure.
I personally think that it should be moved to the 2023 budget. And so instead of using ARPA reserves right now, so I will act in that way.
Do we have a motion on the floor? Sorry.
We do not.
Okay.
Trustee Ursink.
I'd like to make the motion that's suggested here and see where that goes.
Proceed.
I move to budget in 2023 or so. Hold on. I move to budget ARPA reserves to move forward with site feasibility for a new public works facility. Yeah, sure. I move to allocate ARPA reserves to move forward with the feasibility for a new public works facility.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Point of clarification. So you're not doing the suggested motion, you're taking out 2023?
Yeah, I mean, it's or allocate ARPA funds, and I'm just allocating the ARPA funds.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a second?
Can I ask a point of clarification? And maybe this is more for Mark. Is there a reason we couldn't do a motion to include both options and then later decide where the money comes from? Because I want to put money towards this.
I think that's what's in here now. It says, I move to budget in 2023 or allocate ARPA reserves. That's,
Again, staff's thinking on that is to move forward at the board's discretion with this effort, and that it would be funded either by the 2023 capital budget or by ARPA reserves, pending action later this evening on the use of ARPA reserves. So any number of ways we can get to the same place, but that's what staff's thinking was about the wording on that.
So we could approve this with both options in there, and then at a later date, we'll have a choice, an actual choice to make between the two, once we actually know the costs. Oh, okay, okay.
It's later on, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there a second? Inside drive. Okay, motion fails for lack of a second.
I'd like to make a motion.
Please proceed.
I move to budget in 2023 or allocate ARPA reserves to move forward with site feasibility as identified above for a new public works facility.
Second.
All right. Seconded by President McCaig. Any further discussion? You're sure?
I'm coming.
Okay. All right. Would any of members of the public like to speak at this time? Seeing none, we can take a vote. All in favor of the motion? Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you. Next up, consider amendment to City Water AMA Water Meter Replacement Program Management Professional Services Agreement. Director Butchling.
Thank you. Your packet this evening includes an amendment to the professional services agreement with City Water for project management of the AMI water meter replacement implementation. Essentially, in a nutshell, there's two components to this additional request. One relates to the extreme delay caused both by COVID and by the winter pause that we took over the course of the project. And the second component, though a bit smaller, relates to some additional work that is required to provide meter conversion files and meter installation processes for the remaining installations that must occur that will be done by village staff with our own equipment. Some of those protocols could not be determined at the time that the original agreement was put in place because we were not aware of what ultimate software package and or hardware installation would ultimately be selected. And
Okay. Thank you. Do any trustees have questions for the director? Trustee Stokerbrand?
I'm just wondering then, does this help us? Is this like the last piece? Will this get us to that October deadline?
that is my fondest hope.
That's our goal.
That's my goal.
That's our goal. Okay. And then,
We're doing well.
okay,
I'm confident we'll get there.
but we need this piece to finish.
We definitely do.
And then my other question was, would this, I have two. So would this, what this company will do for us, will it include allowing someone to go on our village website and find out if they have a lead lateral? Because you were going to build a database, so people could go in.
The
and
two
look.
are unrelated.
Oh.
But that is in the works, and I had a conversation today about an expectation that I would have that live by the end of September.
I was hoping they could help you, but whatever.
The
Different.
two are unrelated.
Okay. And then I just had a question about this motion. I'm ready to make this motion, but I noticed in reading it that the number also included reimbursable expenses as needed. Would that be wise to add that?
If you wish to do so, I don't expect in this particular instance there to significant reimbursables, but
It talked about mileage.
yeah, you,
Okay.
All right. Do any other trustees have any questions? Would someone like to make a motion? Trustee Stokebrand.
I move approval of amendment number 1 to water. Sorry. I move approval of amendment number 1 to the meter replacement project management professional services agreement in the amount of $8,900 plus reimbursable expenses as needed.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a close fought second. Any further discussion? Would any members of the public like to speak? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. All right. Next up, item H, consider application for Whitefish Bay right-of-way privilege application for Oakland Roadway and the intersection of Glendale and Oakland. I believe you're also up on this, Director
I
Boothlick.
am, thank you. So the application in your packet would be consistent with or equal to your own special privilege process for items that are placed within the village's right of way by someone other than the village. This application to Whitefish Bay requests the placement of bump outs on the south side of the Glendale Oakland intersection per your earlier action this evening. It also addresses the installation and maintenance of a rapid flashing beacon for those pedestrian crossings. Your motion and approval would direct and permit staff to submit this application to the village of Whitefish.
All right, thank you. Any questions, Trustee Kudo?
Just a really quick question. I know that it was mentioned earlier that because we have bump outs going in on Oakland Avenue that precludes plowing, will Whitefish Bay have the same problem with their portion? Nope, I actually take my question back because now I'm looking at the map correctly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do any other trustees have any questions or comments? Trustee Stokebrand.
I was just wondering, it talked for the RFP, it talks about its associated underground electrical feed. And I was wondering if we're not doing solar on these, or is it too early to tell, or is?
It is not our plan to do solar. It's easier and less expensive to hardwire them. Typically, we do solar installations where there is no available electrical tie-in. For example, Wilson. But here, the other RFBs are hardwired that currently.
Okay, thank you.
President McCaig, did you have a comment or question? Take that as a no.
That's a no. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Trustee Ursing.
Yeah, I can make the motion. So I move to approve the Whitefish Bay application for the right of privilege right of way occupancy agreement relating to the installation of a bump out and rapid flashing beacon at the southeast corner of the intersection of North Oakland Avenue and East Glendale Avenue during the planned 2025 reconstruction of North Oakland Avenue, and direct staff to submit the same on behalf of the village of Shorewood.
Second.
All right. Motion by Trustee Ursing, second by Trustee Lynn. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. Item I, consider cost sharing memorandum of understanding with City of Milwaukee for 2023 resurfacing of Edgewood Avenue. Don't go anywhere, Director Butchlick.
Bill me. Your packet includes a memorandum of understanding that was prepared by City of Milwaukee staff. It addresses the restoration / resurfacing of Edgewood Avenue upon completion of MMSD's project. As noted in the memo, When the original MMSD project was envisioned, there was expected to be significantly more open cut trench work than is current. At the time, we were working with the city of Milwaukee for a full reconstruction of Edgewood Avenue. As MMSD refined their engineering work and determined that because of existing utilities, the vast majority of the project would be tunneled, they moved to that model. The city of Milwaukee reviewed the evolving design and determined that a reconstruction was no longer warranted given the minimal amount of roadway excavation, which is really limited to staffs that provide access to tunneling. So the project scope changed to a research. Essentially, what that means is that the existing curb lines stay intact. Because of a program commitment, DOJ ruling that the city faces, they actually remove all pedestrian ramps, radii, and reconstruct all of those ramps, be fully ADA compliant. So this project will include that change on both sides of the municipal boundary. But the city intends to lead this project, do all design work, administer and inspect construction, and basically will invoice Shorewood for a 50% share of the project. The MOU is referenced as a 50% cost sharing agreement. It does include a specific budget number. Obviously, at this point, that is only an estimate. Plans have not been drawn. No construction, no full construction provided. This is really a pretty ballpark guess point. The focus of the MOU is really that 50% cost share. I did leave on your desk a graphic that just gives you some indication of the constraints of the Edgewood environment. There has been some community discussion regarding bike accommodations and other pedestrian safety improvements in the corridor as a part of this project. As you can see from the graphic, we have a 35-foot curb to curb width on Edgewood, which honestly surprised me when I looked it up. Generally, I think we think of Edgewood as being a much wider street than that. I know I do. In fact, Morris is actually wider than Edgewood. So as it's currently configured or marked, bike lanes or accommodations would not be possible without removing parking. But again, this is a community discussion that is evolving. But the MOU before you tonight speaks to cost sharing for whatever work is done. Tonight's, your consideration of that MOU tonight does not require nor preclude any types of. The only thing I would suggest is that this project will require street restoration in 23 is almost fall of. So there will be limited time for those types of. But I have been in contact with a couple different city staffers. They are having those discussions as well. So I cannot give you an exact who, when, where, but it's certainly my expectation that within the coming week, we'll begin at a staff level to what types of improvements are feasible given the fact that that's brought in.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Trustee Ursink?
And if we want to make certain improvements, Milwaukee would also have to agree to those improvements as well. So it's kind of a joint partnership on that level.
I would say essentially yes. I think it's certainly best management practices to have roadways distant, even when those roadways centerline the municipal boundary. I don't think it's in anyone's best interest to have the north side look or function significantly different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Trustee Kudo.
I have a question about point 6 on this MOU. The city of Milwaukee agrees to consult and seek concurrence. And this is a question maybe for Attorney Bear. Is that strong enough language to not force us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do?
Sure. Can you tell me which page that's? I just want to make sure I'm reading the correct.
It is page 2 of the MOU, the cost sharing MOU. And
321 in general.
Oh,
321 of the packet.
Sharing. Okay.
you want me to read it to you?
Or number 6, I've got it here. Okay, so the city of Milwaukee agrees to consult and seek concurrence with the village of Shorewood regarding any field change orders that would result in additional construction costs in excess of 10% after the project. So.
And I guess my question is that to consult and seek concurrence doesn't strike me as agreement. They just have to let us know about it and then make an effort to have us concur, but can move on if we don't.
I think if it's over 10%, my opinion would be that they would have to work collaboratively with the municipality. I don't think they could do anything unilateral.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Would any members of the public like to speak at this time? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right,
I move approval of the cost sharing memorandum of understanding between the city of Milwaukee and the village of Shorewood for the resurfacing of East Edgewood Avenue.
second. All right, motion by trustee Baldoff, second by trustee Arndorfer. Any further discussion? All right, I think we can take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Sorry, Leanne, you're done.
The marathon.
All right, next up, consider project proposal to university year. That's Assistant Manager Anderson.
Thank you. In the memo, it was mentioned that early last month, I had discussions with Gavin Luter over at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And this is a great program. It adds resources and a pipeline for the next generation to get interested in local government projects and policies. So just in speaking with him and knowing that there are a lot of municipalities in the state that have already benefited from having senior level capstone and graduate level students work various projects, I thought it was good for us to write a proposal. And so the 3 projects that were proposed in the proposal, one would be developing a historic framework, a historic preservation framework. Now, what that means could be a couple of things. Would we entertain having an ordinance regarding historic preservation? Would we want to just have tools and mechanisms for homeowners that live in a home that's 100+ years old? We would leverage the outreach that's already happened. I think a couple of years ago, there was a lot of work being done on historic preservation. And the reason this one was also selected to be included is knowing that this has been on some initiatives and various work plans previously. So this is the first one. Another would be to, let's see. The review of our communication strategy. So again, knowing that that is included on work plans, I believe coming up in 2023, this would be helpful to have another set of eyes to kind of perform an audit on our social media accounts, maybe understanding what we could be doing and what other mechanisms are available that our community is using that we are not currently leveraging. And then lastly would be a feasibility study for the electrification of the police fleet. Again, knowing that this is a hot topic in a lot of municipalities, as well as at the board level and our conservation committee, that would be important to include that as a feasibility study. So those are the 3 items that we wrote up in the proposal. This has not been submitted yet. The deadline was actually today, but in the call that I had early last month with Gavin, he let me know that there could be some flexibility there. So we wanted to get this proposal to the board for consideration and hopefully approval.
All right. Thank you. Any trustees have questions for Assistant Manager Anderson? Trustee Stokerbrand.
My only concern is how much staff time it will take. And I think everybody's plates are really full, and supervising graduate students will add that to the list now.
There is a component of a staff level, and in the proposal, I write myself as the one that would be the liaison. Really what happens in year one, it's developing the scope, and the faculty members really are the project managers after it's all said and done. Now, there would be some various check-in calls with the project lead at the municipality level. So there would likely be some follow-ups for me to handle on the various projects that are selected for inclusion in the program years. But again,
If you think it's worth it.
given the fact that, yes, it would add the capacity and on 3 various projects that, we are trying to work on as well.
Just on that note, will this take some work off the plates of village staff at the same time, right?
Exactly.
So that's the idea here, is that there's a financial component, but we're taking all of this work away off the plates of staff. Yeah, okay.
Trustee Baldoff.
I just wanted to say, I think this is great. I very much support this. I'm familiar with the program, and I think it would be a wonderful opportunity for Shorewood. We know that we need to get more young people interested in public service. We want to have ways that we can try to ensure that we are keeping our talent in Wisconsin and that they're not leaving for other states. So I love this. And I would also be really interested, just kind of for future consideration, if there are any other programs that we might be interested in having partnerships. I think this is great. Public Allies is a really wonderful program. So I would just be curious to see what other opportunities there are to get young people engaged in the business of operating the village.
Trustee Stokerbrand.
I'm prepared to make a motion, but I would just like to clarify with the assistant manager that I could put the $25,000 number in the motion, because I did see it.
Right. In the
Could do
proposal
that.
we recommended, right? And in the memo, it talks about a range of 25 to 35. So we've
It is
committed. but-
25.
Okay, yeah, that's
I
correct.
mean, I
It
saw
is
it
25.
later.
Right.
That way it would show up in the minutes. If someone's reading the minutes, they'll know how much.
I see. Thank you.
All right.
Are you going to make the motion?
Committee work going on over here.
Teamwork makes a dream work.
I move to submit the Village of Shorewood's proposal to the 2022-2025 University Year Program not to exceed $25,000.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Stokerbrand, second by Trustee Urtsink. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Trustee Manderson, been waiting all evening for this. Consider additional allocations of remaining ARPA funds.
Thank you. At a previous meeting, the board expressed a desire to have an opportunity to consider the allocation of additional ARPA available funds. A one-page memo outlining what's already been identified, some staff suggestions of things that we've identified as potential needs that would match the funding mechanism of one-time revenues. We seek your review and guidance and action on this or any other project you'd like to move forward.
Any questions from the trustees? Trustee Stokerbrand.
Mark, we spoke a little bit about this during the Budget and Finance meeting. But for those who weren't there, the already spent 50,000, or it's not yet committed 50,000 for document digitalization. There's a proposal then to add another 50 to that. Is that correct? For a total of 100?
That is correct.
And it's my understanding, and I believe the other people in the committee, that this would go towards the minutes, digitizing the minutes, and also property records, so that people could go online and look for the property information that they want. This is a high priority in my view for transparency in the government. I also think that it's imperative that we use, if you look at where we've spent this money, we've done some with infrastructure, the GI, green infrastructure for the alley, I think is important. And I think the sound and video, obviously it's going up a little bit and we're not done yet. I believe it was at 80,000 before. And now we're at 90, just as we're, fine tuning this system. I think it would be important though, if we, I was looking at some of the things that other communities had done, looking at opportunities for aging infrastructure. I support the $30,000 to start a streetlight replacement program to get a study going on that. And I would also support any money. We talked a little bit about lead service lines, but at this point, we don't have any money going from ARPA for that going forward. That's all other sources, or?
That's correct. At this time, we believe that there'll be sufficient other external grant funds available to meet the village's needs for next several years. Of course, those situations can change, but looking towards, at least in the very short term, the 2023 program area, we estimate that amount will be no more than $200,000. And with every indication there'll be monies available for that initiative, as it is a broader topic of interest within the state.
And so if we approve the spending of this now, would this engineering review could we start it yet this year?
That would be correct.
The other thing I was thinking, besides, could we also use some of the, I think Milwaukee is spending $10 million of ARPA money for streetlights. There's no deadline on spending this money, is that correct?
That's actually incorrect. There is a timeline on that, which is why staff's always looking to maintain this discussion so that we utilize those funds while they remain available.
And so what is it?
I believe they have to be committed by the end of 2024.
Oh, committed, but not spent.
That's my understanding.
Okay. So something else I had thought of in the push to, public transit, when we were talking about North Oakland Avenue, I found out that bus shelters are a village responsibility. And having done the walk audit twice now, I thought, well, if you really wanted to encourage public transportation, maybe we should have more bus shelters. Something else to think about. I have no idea what a bus shelter.
That's a great idea, though. I like that. I'd be in support of that.
As a regular bus rider, I would definitely like that.
Trustee Ursing.
I'd like to make a motion. So I move to approve staff recommendations to move forward with the projects identified above with the use of ARPA funds balances.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. And then I have a question.
Okay. Motion.
Let me know they're here for me. And I feel really.
All right. Motion for trustee Ursing, second by trustee Lynn. Any further discussion?
Yes. So based on the motion as it is, and if we all vote for that, these other items, these agenda item discussions, would you then commit to those? These ones down here, or do we have to talk about each one of those separately?
No, staff would start developing RFPs for the village board to consider to move forward on those projects. But first step is a commitment to do so, which we believe that this approval of this would provide guidance to that direction.
And just a clarification just on my end. So the digitalization work that's specified here, that would take place this year then, or what's the timeline for that?
Clerk Harold, do you have any indication on when you would expect to engage with the manager Ewald to begin that process?
I can do that this week, Director Emmanuelson. And then I can give you an update later.
No, I mean, begin digitalization and the RFP. My feedback that I've heard, again, just at informal staff discussions, is that RFP we can start developing this year, but the work probably wouldn't be done until next year.
Okay.
But again, that's, we're going to start moving forward with RFPs if we've got a project commitment.
Got it.
Get the ball rolling.
Thank you. Would any members or any other questions from trustees? Trustee Stokebrand.
I guess I recall, a lot of talk about Village Hall customer service area. But I was surprised to see elections added. And I'm concerned that we're possibly adding $70,000 here for the Village Hall customer service and elections area to do a needs assessment and actually implement them, because I don't know, we were just talking about the bus shelters. I would rather make sure that we have enough money if we wanted to do something else. If we go on the high end of the ranges here, we're at 225 out of 299. That would leave us a cushion of only $50,000. So I guess I'm wondering why elections was added, because I don't think that was there before. It was just always customer service. So what about our elections needs money right now?
All right, Director.
Sure, I can respond to that. We've had some staff transition in the customer service area with Director DeWint Hall resigning a couple of years ago, and we've reorganized the staff in that area, with the customer service staff providing significantly more assistance with elections work. That and a lot of changing needs with elections. So when we look at the customer service area, we're also looking at the area, the big open area behind customer service heading south, and first looking to evaluate, what options would be available to make that a more functional work area for that in the long term, other than folding tables and whatever those little cubicles are. So once we assess that, and again, we're giving ranges because we don't know what the cost proposals are going to be. But we want to also provide some ranges so that, there's a general understanding at some point, when it comes to the board, this is what you've talked about. And if we start going outside of that, that's another discussion for the board. So we're really looking to get an assessment of what would be the options to do with those work areas. And then depending on what that comes back, the board would decide what they may choose to implement. So kind of a two-step process there. And as those projects start ferreting out and proposals start getting awarded, obviously those numbers of available funds start getting much more refined. Again, my rough estimate was that between 100 and 150,000 would remain available for future designation. You're right, though, if everything goes right to the max, it might be slightly less than that. And again, a lot of it depends on scope of work that the board approves. And we just don't have a real sense exactly where we're going to end up on some of these, but would like permission to start moving forward.
I guess on that point, then I would recommend and be willing to make an amendment to the motion to remove the $30,000 to $50,000 for implementation of improvements for customer service and election areas, because we have an election in August, we have an election in November. I think realistically, we're not going to implement this stuff in 2022 anymore. And it would give us more of a cushion if we did want to look at bus stop costs, that might give us the cushion right there.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor, so. Would you,
Just quickly on the bus stops, and this is kind of off topic a little bit, but I'm with you on this. We just voted down a traffic light that's in the range of $250,000. Can those funds be allocated to potential bus stops on North Oakland?
That's what we haven't bonded for that yet. So it's not money we have.
It is a little off topic. I'd be more comfortable
Okay.
bringing that back at a
Got it.
separate time.
I agree. Sorry.
any other questions from trustees? Trustee Kudo.
This is my first sort of go around with RFPs and the costs. To me, $10,000 to $20,000 for a space needs assessment for the village clerk's office sounds incredibly high. Is that normal? I mean, I'm assuming you're going to tell me that it's normal, but
Welcome to government contracting.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like to determine if we have to move some stuff around and what would work and what wouldn't. At its top end, it only comes in at $10,000 less than an engineering review for streetlights. I'm wondering how, this is just my education. I don't necessarily have a problem with this stuff. I'm just wondering why one is only $10,000 more, but seems to be far more comprehensive and
Sure. I mean, that's a fair question. You know, the streetlights is to consider a potential implementation plan and probable costs, the space needs analysis downstairs. There are some structural elements that limit what we can do downstairs. So staff envisions an architect being involved, and then probably some type of engineering or interior or office designer being involved. And again, you know, staff doesn't want to tell you it's going to be 5,000, comes with you at 8,000, and these are all probably high range numbers, and we acknowledge that. Just I'd rather over ask and or under ask over. I don't know.
I know where
I'd
you're
rather
going.
come in under
I
budget
know where
than
you're
over
going with
budget.
this. And again, we still have the kick at the can. This is just to start the ball rolling, but we have another kick at the can at the exact prices.
It's a significant commitment to spend the staff time to move the resources forward, to draft RFPs and engage in these activities, right?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from trustees? Would any members of the public like to speak? Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Oh, okay. Then I.
Okay. All opposed?
Nay.
All right, sounded like related 6-1, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Manuson. Item L, consider path forward on IT service agreement. Assistant Manager Anderson.
Thank you. So we have a couple of forks in the road and we're looking for your guidance on this. At the last village board meeting, you'll recall that Village Manager Ewald mentioned that our break fix model is currently not working. Also, our number of hours that we have is insufficient for our need. With the fact that public sector vendors are pretty cost prohibitive, and the fact that we do have the benefit of a current like-minded municipality that is contracting our IT, or we're contracting with for IT, and the built-in synergy that they're another North Shore community, we're recommending that we stay with Bayside IT. And there are a couple of options supplemented with the agenda memo. There was kind of a decision tree or a process map that shows what we could do. So first off, the strategic decision that we have would be continuing to host our own servers here next door at Village Center, or if it would be advantageous for us to move the servers to be hosted at Bayside IT. At a recent meeting at Bayside, we actually got to visit what their server room looks like. It's does not look like ours. Ours is really a closet, and theirs has, you know, redundancy with heat, air conditioning in case the servers get overheated, and just, I think something like 3 tetrabytes of memory and processing and all that power. So that's the first decision, would be if we want to go ahead and at some point move our servers to be hosted by Bayside or not. And then the associated cost, if we do not, Bayside has estimated that for us to get our room into an order that would have us be responsibly maintaining our data and our servers, it would be probably close to $250,000, maybe a little bit under. And that would be upcoming in the next few years. So before we get into drafting the service agreement or language, we also wanted to make sure that that was known to the board. So again, $250,000 if we want to continue hosting our own servers, or we could move them over to Bayside at no cost. And then there are 2 options for the level of service for hours that we would have Bayside AT working with us. One is at 20 hours at 78,000 for fiscal year 23, or 40 hours at 105,000. So in that graphic, we have the various cost estimates to the far right, just so you can see that as well. But that's what I put together, and I stand ready for any questions.
Do any trustees have questions?
I have a question. So in the current model here of 8 hours per week, are we often going over that?
Yes.
And about how many hours are we using per week?
I'd have to approximate, because we did ask for that in a recent meeting with Bayside. We kind of wanted to know where the hours were being spent, but we knew that it was going over. I mean, we recently had a patch outage that needed to be done next door, and other items were uncovered as a result of our deferred maintenance with some IT infrastructure. So by going forward with the capital items that are also listed there, that'll, number one, get us in a better position with just what we need to do in our day-to-day business. But secondly, an added benefit would be that it gets us ready for that transition over to have our servers hosted by then, if that's the decision of the board.
Okay.
Okay, and just to clarify, for the recommended motion, you're looking for the board to make a decision between 20 hours or 40 hours, or you would be exploring those options further?
We've got the numbers here. I don't know if there's more direction or more information needed. We'd be glad to do that. But before I drafted the service agreement, I wanted to include the information regarding the servers being hosted as well.
Okay.
So we need that in the longer term.
Trustee Harrison.
I just want to know how, we're about to digitize all of these documents, and would love to know how this plays into that, right? So we're gonna need space for all of that information, and it should be accessible online in the cloud. So how, would you think that, the option 1 would be sufficient for all of that information? Or are we looking at, once we have everything digitized, is that going to be a problem?
I would have to get that answered by someone that is in the IT realm. I'm really sorry, but as far as the number of hours after digitization, I don't know if there would need to be any monitoring of the server after that. Really, the number of hours comes down to, and this is tough, because in our current break fix, the fact that we're being very reactionary, we are going over 8 hours. But in the 20 or 40, once we get some more of the IT infrastructure items addressed, that could go down.
Director.
Yeah, just Chris, I think one more aspect that I would like to add is that at the 20-hour service level, we get charged hourly rates for capital work.
Thank you.
Which means installing our our switches, installing firewalls, battery packs. I mean, this sounds easy. It's a lot harder than it sounds. So at the 40 hours, that's included. So the cost of our capital work will actually go down because we don't have to pay extra hours for IT time to make that happen. So just another facet of the conversation when I took away from the meeting we had last week.
Thank you for adding. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yeah, trustee Lynn.
How, like, if we go with one or the other, how long are we locked into that time frame? Because I know in the email correspondence earlier, you had mentioned we could maybe start with 20 and see how it goes, and if we need to bump it up to 40, we could do that. Would the reverse also be true? If we do 40 hours now, works great for 6 months, and then in 6 months we realize we don't really need that much, are we free to go down to 20? That type of thing.
Without going back out to RFP and my understanding of our procurement guidelines, we are under right now going to end our 3 years, and we have an additional 2 years. So my understanding is that we would have an agreement for 1 year. Maybe if we do need to adjust it, we could. I would have to get further clarification though from Manager Ewald.
Okay, but it'd be pretty much a year would be
Right.
assumed.
And they didn't offer a 30 hours a week. Sounds like that would be the sweet spot, right?
They did not offer that.
And so I saw something about $25,000 to transfer the information. Is that a separate, or is that included? Did I see that? On page, the cost to move our servers would be about $25,000.
Oh, yes.
So is that an additional cost we need to include in the motion?
Yes, I apologize for missing that
Okay.
in the decision tree.
And then, so is this something that would start, I mean, is this part of the budget process, or this is for 2023?
Yes, your guidance tonight will formulate the 2023 budget, both for IT service support as well as exactly the specifics of the capital requests. Again, there's going to be some fluctuation in those numbers depending on which choice the board recommends. The other thing I just might add for context is Bayside IT has to hire staff to increase our hours. So that's why they formulated their position where a 40-hour going from 20 to 40 is much more affordable. Make that leap. It's not double the cost because it maximizes, the ability for them to have additional staff to meet our needs.
Trustee Stoker-Brown.
So we're just giving direction and it'll come before us at a future meeting. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so I plan to support 40 hours. I just don't see that now is a time to not underfund IT.
I was just going to mention, first I was going to mention 20,000 covered, but I was just, the director of Manuelson's difference between options 1 and 2. It's not really between 78 plus 100 per hour over 20. So if you figure that, if you subtract 105 from 78 and then divide by 100, you've got 270 hours of difference. So if you average an extra 5 hours a week through a 52-week year, a little over an extra 5 hours a week, you're gonna hit the
You're there.
break-even point between option 1. My math. So if you're averaging over a little over 5 extra hours a week, some more, some less, you're gonna get pretty close to
So you don't need a number in this motion because it's just for direction. Other than the 24. That's the only
Correct,
number you
correct.
need to.
And then we'll bring the agreement forward at a future meeting.
for fiscal year 2023.
Correct.
Trustee Kudo.
I'm ready to make a motion. I move to add the amended IT service agreement of 40 hours per week with the Village of Bayside to an upcoming village board meeting.
Second.
Motion by trustee Kudo, second by trustee Stokebrand. Any further discussion? Would any members of the public like to speak? Further discussion? Once, twice. All right, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Aye, it's carried at 7-0. All right. Thank you very much, Assistant Manager. Item next up, reports of village officials, village president.
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay. Quickly, the ICC Racial Equity and Inclusion Committee has 4 members, myself, Mayor McBride from Wauwatosa, Mayor Devine from West Dallas, and President Montgomery from Brown Deer. And then an item that I forgot to put on the agenda, but more details to follow. I think we're going to have a by-board meeting on August 15th, 4 to 6 p.m. And as I said, agenda to follow.
Thank you. Any reports from village trustees? Trustee Ursink.
Yep, real quickly, at the farmer's market over the weekend, Shorewood Police Department showed up and Chief Worth was there for the whole farmer's market, as well as 4 other officers. And just speaking with one of the officers without him knowing I was a trustee, he was very open that the chief is really adamant that they go out in the community, that they invest their time into these kind of community activities. And they were fantastic. I mean, the officers were wonderful. They engaged with the public. They let kids sit in the police car, and it was. They handed out slow down signs and bike lights. It was a really great experience, and I just want to say thank you to the police department for coming out and spending the time in the community like that.
Did they have brewers cards, or is it just?
No, we talked about that.
Jim Gantner card.
BJ Searhoff.
Trustee Kudo.
So I had an opportunity to do a ride along with the Shorewood Police Department last week. Fantastic experience. Would highly recommend anyone doing it that's able. Was able to spend 8 hours with 2 different officers on what we would consider the second shift. I know it's their lingo. It doesn't make any sense. But the second shift, it was just a really great experience. I learned a ton, even after having lived here for a long time. The officers were fantastic. Much the same experience that Trustee Ursink had. They had nothing but wonderful things to say about Chief Worth, her ability to communicate. And so that was one great thing that has happened since last we met. And the other one was that I was able to scoop some custard at the library celebration last week, along with the village clerk, as well as the chief of police, some other elected officials. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. We went through a lot of vanilla custard for the kids and a lot of adults. It was just a really good experience. And again, the police were there, and they were, not just standing around, they were out helping people, talking to people. And so I just thought it was another great example of sort of the village coming together. So thought I would mention it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, next up, village manager update.
Right, pardon as I hiccup through this. I'm going to get this shared. Okay. Well, maybe not. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so at the last board meeting, we went over the proposed 2023 work plans, and there was a lot of discussion that happened there. And I believe that there was a discussion about current state being requested. So we wanted to go over the Q2 update of the work plans and trustee initiatives as well. So again, this annual process, the staff and board submit initiatives in May, just to recap. And the agreement is provided prior to the budget development. So again, this is meant to steer priorities throughout the year. It's a mechanism so that individual board members can submit requests for the board to consider. We have this process outlined in the annual planner, and the work plans are reviewed quarterly. I won't read quite all these dates. All these links are included here. This just provides a little bit more timeline. I know that we, let's see, in the fall, the initiatives will be reflective in the 2023 budget. So just to highlight that second to last bullet. And after budget is completed, or after we complete the budget and get it approved, the initiatives will be programmed in the 2023 work plans. To provide a little bit of a graphic, that thermometer, I guess, on the far right just provides a little bit of a status bar where we're at. So as you start at the top, these aren't in rank order. They're again just in order of how we're envisioning their progress in 2022. So at the end of Q2, this is the standing of each of these initiatives and their status. Some may be, again, called out in a different area, as far as, like, we see the second to last one there, historic preservation. With your approval, submitting this, the university year program, we could see this go forward under that method as well. Again, these have been recapped, but we had this listed in the 2022 work plans of each of the departments. So this is just to kind of provide the visual of what we're doing with initiatives and what is also on our plates in addition to just daily duties. So this provides just a graphic of what everybody's working on in the various departments. I believe last meeting there was also questions about the future items of consideration. So again, these are items that are kind of addressed as time permits. And so with the village board providing ideas for items to be added to this future items of consideration, we in the past these have been addressed in order of placement on the list or based on time sensitivity in the event we have a suspense on other various topics that are aligned with other deadlines. So these work plans, initiatives, and future items of consideration are evaluated together, and a staff assistance is required and supports all these activities in addition to general operations. If the board desires a different approach of how we factor the work plans, initiatives, and future items of consideration, we would like that to be potentially specified. This, I believe, Manager Ewald put together before she was out. She actually called through some minutes to put this together. So I apologize. I probably can't speak to this in great detail. But again, just wanted to provide an update of where we were on Q2 initiatives and just showing the various work plan items that are on the department's lists of projects at the moment. That's what I had.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions?
No, I just want to thank you for the different ways of looking at it. As a visual person, it's very helpful to me to not look at an Excel spreadsheet. Even though what some of these do look like Excel spreadsheets, but they've masked their Excelness.
So I'm tricking you. I'm kidding. I should mention that we also included the full detail of the work plan, the DPW and non-DPW work plans in the packet as well.
So now, for example, with the approval today of the money to fund the street lighting program, that will go into Q3 study.
Correct, yes.
Any other clarifying questions, comments? All right, thank you very much, Assistant Manager. On to, speaking of future items of consideration, President McCagg.
Oops, let me stop this. Bye.
There she is.
I'm here. So I am finding the wording because I'm going back to my agenda. Can you tell me what the agenda was? I mean, what the item is?
Consider policy for individual and friends group donations.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to consider a policy for individual and friends group donations. This was prompted by a recent request from the newly formed Friends of Shorewood Nature Preserve. They're interested in having a landscaping project move forward with the village. And it's not that that request has to wait for a policy to be developed, but it's more that this is a reminder that over the past 10 years, we've done some development work around how we handle donations and understandings moving forward and agreements around those donations. And it is time to revisit those because they're incomplete and unclear. So many of them were developed under previous direction. And so now that there's a new group involved and moving forward, we need to update those. So at this time, I'd like to the board to consider, I'd like to make a motion to consider a policy for individual and friends group donations. This would be directing staff to draft a policy or bring forward what we have. And this could start with a committee. It could be community and business relations, or it could be JP&L.
All right.
I'd second the motion. I don't know if we need clarity on where it goes first.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any questions? Trustee Stokebrand?
So you think we have a policy, but we need to revisit it or clarify it or possibly change? Is there something on the books?
We have a donation, it might be called a program. They were guidelines developed with the Shorewood Foundation probably 10 years ago now. And it included a list of items that was kind of a wish list for the community that is very outdated. Many of them have been acquired or they've been, for instance, there were a lot of playground items for the schools. The schools have just updated their playgrounds. So, what we have on record is not relevant anymore. And it also, that donation program didn't take into consideration things like, raising funds for a landscaping project, and it also didn't look at comprehensively what the parks needed. There are just some procedural things that come to bear when donations for acquiring, either executing village contracts or for example, the foot washing donation, the foot washing station that FAB wanted to fund last year. It's hard to anticipate all of the decision points that come into play when you're, raising funds for essentially government contracts. So it's something that would make sense to think it through, put it out on paper so that potential donors, individuals and groups are much more clear about how to proceed, and staff is able to proceed as well, and what requires village board action and what doesn't, for example. Also, this donation program was developed before we had the procurement policy. So not everything is consistent with that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Kudo?
Just, do we have a motion? Formal motion?
Yeah, we have a motion in a second.
Okay.
All right. Motion in a second. I think we're ready to take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I believe the next agenda item
I was going to move to
is adjournment.
Move to
I've got
adjourn.
a future, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
that's right.
Sorry about that.
Apologize. Sorry, I'll make it quick. But I would like to, just kind of going back to our conversation on covering bus stops, I'd like to propose that we make a motion to direct staff to research expense and funding options for covering bus stops on North Oakland Avenue.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments?
I'm not, so I comment, I'm not at all opposed to bus stops. What I would like to do is make sure that we have a conversation with SPD. One of the things that I talked about with the officers when I was doing ride-alongs is sort of a marked increase in homeless populations going through Shorewood or stopping in Shorewood in the last couple of years. And so I just want to make sure that they're part of the conversation from the front end as to whether or not, you know, they think good idea, bad idea, whatever it happens to be. But I know that it was a part of the ride along that I did. So just, I'm throwing that out there.
Sure.
Right.
Welcome that conversation.
Anyone else, comments, questions? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes. I'm gonna suspect that Ann's an aye on this one, but all right, there we go.
There we go.
All right, anyone else have any items before I peremptorily cut them off, or?
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
I think I heard her move to adjourn in a second. Any discussion?
Zero.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody.